Chapter 2533. Doomsday of the Dead Sea. Tu Mingji was speechless. However, he didn't struggle for long before he saw that the few people who had just run away had indeed brought a large number of people to die. Laughing coldly in his heart, Minga took the lead and rushed forward. His sudden attack had thrown the enemy's formation into disarray. According to the enemy's plan, they had brought so many people to overwhelm Lung Ruoxia's group of 3 with their imposing manner. Unfortunately, they did not even have the chance to perform as Ming Ji had directly destroyed their deployment. When the formation was in chaos, people naturally panicked. Especially when they saw Ming Ji's godlike aura, many people were frightened. The timid ones wanted to escape, but unfortunately, their path was blocked by the seemingly calm Feng Chuan. Feng Chuan also didn't say anything and directly spat out the southern spirit Li fire. In an instant, countless people turned into a sea of fire. Arg! A demon! Hurry up and run! The sounds of noise, chaos, and wails rang out one after another, turning the originally spacious street into a mess. Lung Ruoxia couldn't help but find it funny when she heard herself and the rest being called demons. Weren't the people here all extremely vicious and evil? Villains who killed without even blinking? He actually had the nerve to call them demons? Was there a mistake? With a faint smile, Lung Ruoxia stood up as well. When many people saw Lung Ruoxia move, they suddenly recalled that there was a hostage here. They had been so scared by Ming Ji and Feng Chuan that they had almost forgotten that there was a soft girl here. With this thought, many people immediately pounced towards Lung Ruoxia, wanting to take her as a hostage. It was a pity that when Lung Ruoxia got close to them, they realized that they had miscalculated. It was true that the other party was a soft girl, but it depended on who they were up against. To them, Lung Ruoxia was comparable to a female T-Rex. In the blink of an eye, after Lung Ruoxia made her move, they did not even have the chance to sense the arrival of the god of death before they were all dead. After killing another group of people, Lung Ruoxia and Feng Chuan returned to their old ways. Seeing this, Ming Ji no longer stood there stupidly. However, he didn't have a recliner, so he calmly went to a shop not far away and borrowed a chair. He said he was borrowing it, but as soon as the other party saw him, they immediately hid in fear, so Minga had to do it herself. The 3 of them sat in the middle of the street and chatted calmly. The people who were watching from afar had already sent the news back to their respective forces. They didn't know what the other party was thinking. In short, in the 2 hours they had been chatting, they didn't even see a figure who came to provoke them. "Miss Lung, are we just going to sit here like monkeys and let people watch us?" After sitting there for a long time, Ming Ji was a little unsettled. "You're tired?" Lung Ruoxia lifted her eyelids and said with an understanding look. "A little." Minga nodded helplessly. "That wasn't the main point, okay? Then let's take the initiative to attack," Lung Ruoxia suddenly said. Initially, she thought that the people here would be more courageous. With such a good bait like her, many people would take the bait. Who knew that a few hours had passed and no one dared to have any ideas about them? This really disappointed her. Take the initiative to attack? Hearing this, Ming Ji was shocked. Did it mean what it said? There was still some other meaning. Yes, take the initiative to attack. Lung Ruoxia gave Feng Chuan a look. Feng Chuan obediently took out a piece of paper, and it was full of words. Thanks. Minga took it and looked at it curiously, and she was suddenly a little confused. Isn't this the list of all the major powers in the Dead Sea? When did they get it? Why didn't he know about it? This was written by the innkeeper for me. He was afraid that I would offend them in the Dead Sea, so he said that there are still good people in the Dead Sea. Lung Ruoxia praised. A good person? No way. The inn manager wasn't that kind. They probably had no choice but to submit to Lung Ruoxia's tyranny. However, when he saw Lung Ruoxia take out the list of the major powers in the Dead Sea, he more or less had an idea of what was going on. After silently mourning for the various forces of the Dead Sea, Ming Ji made an expression of risking her life to accompany a gentleman and said, "Where do you want to go first? How about we split up?" Lung Ruoxia raised her eyebrows and looked at Ming Ji. Well, Ming Ji hesitated. He was not very willing to do so. If Lung Ruoxia was not in front of him, he would not be at ease. Even though he had only spent a short time with Lung Ruoxia, He was very clear that Lung Ruoxue had a constitution that would definitely cause trouble. Unfortunately, his opinion did not matter to Lung Ruoxue at all. With a thought, Lung Ruoxue moved Uncle Dragon, the others, and the Abyss Dragons out of the house. After regaining their freedom, Uncle Dragon, the others, and the Abyss Dragons were moved to tears. They had only spent a few days together, but they had already formed a revolutionary friendship. In the next second, the human and the dragon hugged each other tightly. To be more precise, Uncle Dragon and the others were being carried by the enormous netherworms. Seeing this scene, Ming Ji's face darkened, and the corners of his mouth twitched uncontrollably. After being with Lung Ruoxue and the others for so long, it seemed that nothing was new to him. However, their lively actions frightened the scouts who were watching them from a distance. Some spies had already sent the news back to their forces. Pay attention. Attention. Emergency alert. Azura's team had expanded again. I don't know where, but a lot of people appeared out of nowhere, as well as several dozen well-behaved netherworms. They seem to be quite close, and they're currently hugging each other. Uncle Dragon, the others, and the netherworms were all quite powerful. Although the spy who had sent the message had thought that he had spoken as quietly as possible, they had still heard everything clearly. In an instant, the faces of Uncle Dragon, the others, and the netherworms all darkened. Looking at this comical scene, Minga didn't know whether to laugh or cry. However, he didn't stop the furious Uncle Long and the others. Instead, he gloated at them. Uncle can endure it, but Aunt can't. Unwilling to be laughed at, Uncle Dragon and the other netherworms all pounced toward the scouts in the distance. In an instant, dozens of meters away, it was bustling with activity. As for the spies of the various major factions, they were naturally no match for the brutal Uncle Dragon and the other netherworms. They didn't even have a chance to struggle before they were all annihilated. Uncle Long and the others were still angry after this. Seeing this, Lung Ruoxue did not comfort him. Instead, she smiled and told Uncle Long and the others, "Uncle Long, let's split up and head to their respective lairs." "All right. Schwer knows us best." Hearing this, Uncle Dragon and the others all rubbed their fists and wiped their palms, while the netherworms all excitedly cawed and howled. These violent people. Why didn't he feel that these people had such violent tendencies when he was at the Joyo City Lord's mansion? Minga covered his face. He knew that his reputation would be ruined if he followed these people. Fortunately, this was the Dead Sea. Even if everyone here died, it wouldn't affect the 9 Nether prison much. It was actually a good thing. But in this case, it was impossible not to alert the master of the Death Sea. However, Mingji knew that no one could stop these people now. If he didn't follow the other party, he would lose face. Therefore, he must not let the other party look down on him. Chapter 2534. The End of the Dead Sea 3. In order to prevent Ming Ji from feeling guilty for killing her fellow townsmen, Lung Ruoxue kindly assigned Uncle Long and Dongfeng Yu to him. She also assigned a few other Reverend God-level experts to Feng Chuan's side. She brought along some of the Grand Elder, and the others who were slightly weaker, and were obviously just there to watch the show. When Ming Ji saw this lineup, she was immediately discontented. "Miss Lung, it's very unreasonable to divide it like this," Ming Ji protested. Who knew that Lung Ruoxue would look at the situation of the 3 teams and nod her head in understanding. "It's indeed unreasonable." With that, she took Feng Zhan out of the bracelet and said, "Senior, you'll be in the same group as them and be in charge of dealing with the aftermath." The so-called aftermath was naturally to destroy the corpse and erase all traces. The old phoenix understood. Minga understood, and his mouth twitched again. He didn't mean it that way, okay? He was referring to the fact that his reverent god-level strength was too strong. To put it bluntly, he was worried about Lung Ruoxue. However, looking at Lung Ruoxue's serious expression, Ming Ji was too embarrassed to say that she was playing dumb. Instead, it was Uncle Long who patted Ming Ji's shoulder comfortingly and said, "Let's listen to Shui Er's arrangements." Seeing Uncle Long's face, which clearly showed that he wanted him to accept his fate, Ming Ji was speechless. At this moment, the netherworms started making a fuss again. Boss, what about us? What are we doing? You guys do as you please. You can move freely." Lung Ruoxue said after some thought. All right. Boss Nether Dragon nodded obediently. Let's go. Contact me at any time if you have any questions. After Lung Ruoxue finished speaking, she gave Mingji a list of forces and left with the Great Elder and the others. We went that way. Feng Chuan pointed in the opposite direction of Lung Ruoxue. All right. Mingji nodded. Then led Uncle Long and Dongfeng Yu down the last remaining path. After Lung Ruoxue and the rest left, the Abyss Dragons stared at each other for a long time. One of the Abyss Dragons asked in a daze, "Where are we going? Did Boss forget to give us a list of forces?" "We don't need a list of forces. Boss said that we can do whatever we want. Why don't we go to the City Lord's mansion to play?" The Netherworm Boss suggested after scratching its head with its large claws. "The City Lord's mansion? All right, let's go to the City Lord's mansion." The Nether Dragons responded in unison. In any case, they knew that the Lord of the Dead Sea wasn't home. If they didn't go now, when would they? This was a great opportunity. After making their decision, the Netherworms collectively flew toward the City Lord's mansion. After everyone split up, Lung Ruoxue was the first to find the faction on the list. However, just as she walked to the entrance of the faction, the moment the guards at the entrance saw her, they immediately panicked and slammed the door shut. Following that, a roar came from inside. "The killing god is here! Quickly close the door and release the boss." When Lung Ruoxue, First Elder, and the rest heard this, they looked at each other with bright eyes. First Elder even said with an awkward expression, "Shui, your reputation is growing." Lung Ruoxue didn't know how to respond to this, but Jiangning said with pride, "That's right, Shui's reputation is getting bigger and bigger, so we can't be too weak in the future. So just leave this battle to us. You can just go and search for their treasures." "Thanks, are you sure?" Lung Ruoxue's beautiful eyes lingered on the Grand Elder, Jiangning, Shenhua, and the rest. The few non-combat type main force members were instantly enraged. "Shui, don't look down on us. We are also very strong." Jiangning roared. "That's right. I'll let you experience it today." Shenhua also said fiercely. Taking a look at the gentle and handsome Shenhua, Lung Ruoxue was surprised to find that the children around her had all been corrupted. Furthermore, looking at their attitude, it was definitely not going to work if they did not take part in this battle. The helpless Lung Ruoxue could only agree to the words of the pill refiners and weapon refiners who were filled with battle intent. Seeing that Lung Ruoxue had given in, the Great Elder excitedly took out a small black ball and threw it into the door. Following that, the few of them who were calm and collected took a few steps back in unison. Following that, there was a loud explosion, and the door was shattered into pieces. When the people inside saw that their sturdy doors had been blown up, they became even more panicked. Especially when they saw Lung Ruoxue and her group approaching. The more timid ones were so scared that they retreated. At this moment, a person who looked like the boss shouted at the top of his voice, "Who are you people? How dare you come here and cause trouble?" That person was very angry, but the Azura's name was too famous. In less than an hour, it had spread throughout the entire Dead Sea. At first, he wanted to join forces with the other forces, and find a chance to get rid of these people, who knew that before he could even put it into action, they had already come to his door. Although the woman in front of him was very beautiful, he was not in the mood to admire her at this time, especially when this beauty was not to be trifled with. In a situation where he could lose his life if he was not careful, he could not just be greedy for her beauty. Therefore, when he shouted these words, it could be said that he had mustered up enough courage. If the beauty could be attracted by his domineering aura, that would be the best. Even if he couldn't, he had to let this woman know that fighting was a man's business. It was fine as long as a woman knew how to warm the bed and give birth. The leader of a certain force was fantasizing in her heart that Lung Ruoxue had green vessel to inform her. The thoughts of the man in front of her who was only pretending to be strong, but was actually a weakling, could not be hidden from her. Hence, she said nonchalantly, "If I don't cause trouble, why would I come to your place? He couldn't have come to see you, right?" You, the leader of the faction, who was not very eloquent, was so angry that he was at a loss for words. He pointed at Lung Ruoxue for a long time, but he could not form a complete sentence. Jiangning saw that he had been at a loss for words for a long time, so he lost his patience and threw a few dark gray pills at him. Before he could react, the dark gray pills on the ground turned into a light smoke and blended into the air. Damn it, can't you say something before you attack? Seeing this, the first elder angrily said as he hurriedly stuffed a pill into his mouth. I'm an impetuous person. Jiangning laughed evilly. The opponent was depressed when he heard them dumbfounded. What was going on? What were those pills just now? Don't blame them for being ignorant and ill-informed. It was really because their knowledge of medicinal pills was too little. They had no idea that there was a kind of medicinal pill in the world called poison pill. Very quickly, the other party was hit. In the beginning, it was as if there were ants crawling all over their bodies. It was extremely itchy and hard to resist. At this moment, they couldn't care less about Lung Ruoxue and the others in front of them. They focused on tickling them. When they finally managed to get over it, their bodies were burning as if they were on fire. Fuck. What's going on? Damn it, what the hell is this? The opponent who was hit started to curse. Lung Ruoxue observed the situation and could only say, "Do it. Give them a quick death." All right. Jiangning agreed without hesitation. Then he threw out a few more pills. Lung Ruoxue watched as the people in front of her fell to the ground without even having the chance to fight back. Then, she saw with her own eyes how the skin of her opponents, who had originally been smooth and full, gradually shriveled up. Very quickly her opponents, who looked like dead tree bark, had turned into white bones. In the end, even their bones had been crushed into dust and scattered with the wind. Chapter 25-35. Beauty, do you want to save him? 1. The corners of Lung Ruoxue's mouth twitched. Was this a new poison that they had invented? It was indeed powerful. Swear, we did well, right? Jiangning looked at Lung Ruoxue arrogantly. Not bad. You guys continue, I'll deal with the aftermath. After Lung Ruoxue finished speaking, she turned around and left. The place she was going to was the treasure room of this force. By the time Lung Ruoxue was done with her own matters and returned to the front yard, the Grand Elder and the others were already waiting for her. Jiangning reported to her with a fawning expression. "Swear, I've cleaned everything up. I guarantee that no fish has escaped the net. All right. We've gotten rid of the evil in the netherworld prison," Lung Ruoxue said with a look of righteousness. After getting rid of this force, they continued to move without stopping. Although many people in their team were not combat-oriented talents, they were the fastest to take care of their opponents. They even made their opponents unable to fight back. They also adhered to humanitarian principles and tried to kill them in a way that made them feel no pain. As Lung Ruoxue and the others acted too quickly, the organizations that were targeted did not even have the chance to pass on the news to their allies before they were completely annihilated. In less than half a day, the force that Lung Ruoxue was in charge of had completely disappeared from the face of the earth. After finishing their own work, they moved the battlefield to help Feng Chuan, who knew that once Feng Chuan saw them he would be so protective of his food, and even recommend them to help Mingji. When they reached Mingji, Lung Ruoxue helplessly realized that Uncle Long and the others, who were having fun, didn't seem to welcome them. "Why don't we go to the City Lord's mansion?" Lung Ruoxue suggested. "The City Lord's mansion? The City Lord isn't in the mansion. Why are we going there?" Jiangning was a little confused. He wasn't very interested in things like the City Lord's mansion. There should be a lot of good things in the City Lord's mansion. There might even be some precious herbs. Lung Ruoxue mumbled to herself. Hearing this, Jiangning and the others immediately agreed. "Let's go to the City Lord's mansion." Although the Nether prison didn't produce alchemists, there were many medicinal herbs that could be used in medicine. Although most of them were not edible by ordinary people, they rarely made medicinal pills for ordinary people. Therefore, the herbs here were just what they wanted. Lung Ruoxue knew that the temptation of the herbs was greater than the heavens to them. Using the herbs to lure them was the best method. However, when they really arrived at the City Lord's mansion, they realized that the City Lord's mansion's territory had also been occupied. The netherworms were wreaking havoc in the City Lord's manor, having a lot of fun. Thanks, the entire City Lord's mansion was in a state of high alert. Under the leadership of the City Lord's mansion's chief butler, the guards in the mansion were trying their best to defend themselves in an extremely embarrassing manner. Why did the guards of the City Lord's mansion only defend and not attack? They had to mention the matter that made them extremely sad and angry. To put it simply, the skin of the Abyss Dragons was too thick, and they couldn't move them. However, when the Abyss Dragons swung their long tails, all of them had excellent aim, and it was guaranteed that they would hit them. In addition, the bodies of these Abyss Dragons were as large as small mountains, and the originally not-so-small City Lord's manor was instantly filled up by them. No matter where they ran, they would encounter Abyss Dragons with lecherous smiles, making it impossible for them to avoid them. It was as if the Abyss Dragons were deliberately toying with them. Their long tails swung back and forth in the air, but they did not kill them, causing their hearts to jump to their throats. This feeling was quite unpleasant, and after dodging back and forth a few times, their hair was in a mess, their clothes were in a mess, and they were panting. In short, everyone in the City Lord's manor, from the butlers to the guards and servants, was in an extremely sorry state. Damn it. Can you guys be more serious? It was unknown who it was, but someone couldn't take it and shouted. Lung Ruoxue and the others heard a cheap voice reply, "Of course not. We can't play you to death so easily." Lung Ruoxue understood the Abyss Dragon's meaning. They were simply saying that they only treated them as toys, so they couldn't let them die too quickly. The underlying meaning of the Abyss Dragon's words caused Lung Ruoxue's forehead to be filled with black lines. She had always thought that these Abyss Dragons were still considered innocent. Why was it that now? The Grand Elder and the others understood the Netherworm's thoughts as well. They turned to look at Lung Ruoxue in unison. Although they did not say anything, their eyes clearly expressed their thoughts. "Schwer, you've led the Netherworms astray." Lung Ruoxue had been wronged. She felt even more wronged than Do-E. She had to find a way to clear her name. However, she had to find an unlucky guy to vent her anger first. With this thought in mind, Lung Ruoxue glanced at a middle-aged man who was the closest to her. Not only was this middle-aged man short, but he also had a very wretched appearance. In order to express the anger in his heart, the middle-aged man was jumping up and down, waving his fists and cursing. "It's you." Lung Ruoxue made up her mind. Uncivilized people should be eliminated first. In the next moment, a small flame floated away from Lung Ruoxue's fingertips. The small flame did not attract anyone's attention other than causing the temperature to rise instantly. It was only when the small flame floated to the front of the target's clothes and lit it that the middle-aged man and the people beside him came to a sudden realization. "Head butler, you're on fire." "Arg. Put out the fire. Quickly put out the fire." The scene was in chaos again. Lung Ruoxue had not expected that the target she had chosen was actually the City Lord's residence's head butler. "Oh. Alright. To capture the bandits, first capture the leader. Since the master of the Dead Sea was not around, then he would start with this head butler." The people around the chief steward helped to put out the fire. However, those people were getting more and more busy. Not only did the fire on the chief steward not be put out, but the people who put out the fire also caught on fire. This time, the scene became even more chaotic. "Hey, race the water. The water's here." At this moment, someone shouted. Then a bucket of water was poured on the chief butler and the others. With the help of the water, the fire did not die out, but instead became more intense. This time, everyone was dumbfounded, including the Netherworms. However, their thoughts were different from those of the City Lord's mansion. They thought to themselves in an extremely depressed manner, "Boss is here. There's no end to this." Well, the Abyss Dragons looked in the direction of Lung Ruoxue and the others, feeling extremely wronged. They gave Lung Ruoxue a resentful look. Then they hardened their hearts and attacked from the left and right with their large tails. Whether it was those whose bodies were on fire, or those who were helping to extinguish the fire, they were all whipped into the air by their furious tails. In the air, the people who were on fire quickly turned into smoke and disappeared. The lucky survivors were thrown into the air, but before they could stabilize themselves, they fell again. Unfortunately, the Netherworms caught them with their tails, and soon, they were thrown high up into the air again. This cycle repeated for a long time, and the survivors began to foam at the mouth. Those who had a little bit of consciousness couldn't bear it anymore and shouted, "You evil demons, just give us a quick death. Don't even think about it." Boss Netherworm said viciously. These 2 words instantly shattered all the hopes of the survivors. Their hearts were instantly filled with despair. Chapter 2536. Beauty, do you want to save him? 2. After that, the Netherworms continued to play their games. Lung Ruoxue was helpless, and could only let them be. Not long after, Mingji, Fengchuan, and the others who had completed their mission, also came to the City Lord's mansion. Seeing the mess in the City Lord's mansion, Mingji was so surprised that she couldn't even close her mouth. He had to admit that he had underestimated the destructive power of Lung Ruoxue and the others. These people were simply the killing gods among the killing gods, the fighter planes among the killing gods. Young Miss Lung, have you been to the City Lord's mansion's treasure room? Mingda didn't know what she should do, so she could only chat casually. I haven't tea. Go now. Only then did Lung Ruoxue remember that she had been too engrossed in watching the show, and had actually thrown the most important thing to the back of her mind. She was really unprofessional. After she finished speaking, under Qingju's guidance, Lung Ruoxue led the group of curious people to the City Lord's mansion's treasure vault. Seeing how familiar Lung Ruoxue was with the City Lord's mansion, Mingji was amazed along the way. She couldn't help but sigh in her heart. It seemed that this little girl had many tricks up her sleeve, until Lung Ruoxue pointed to an unremarkable wooden door and said, "We're here." His eyes widened again. "Miss Lung, are you sure this is the place?" Mingji blinked and blinked again. He couldn't believe that this was the place where the master of the Dead Sea kept his treasures. He wouldn't even believe that this was a warehouse. Of course. Lung Ruoxue was full of confidence. Qingju's senses were definitely not wrong. Qingju had even told her that there would be a surprise here. Lung Ruoxue's curiosity was piqued. She was in no hurry to find out what the surprise Qingju was talking about was, so she pushed the door open. Not locked. Lung Ruoxue trusted Qingju's judgment, and knew that this place could not possibly be a trap. This could only mean that the master of the Dead Sea was too arrogant, and thought that no one would dare to enter his city lord residence, and that he would definitely not close his doors at night. If this was the case, the Death Sea Master would probably regret it so much that his intestines would turn green. Lung Ruoxue chuckled to herself. She pushed the door open, and was about to enter when she was stopped by Mingji, who had a cautious look on his face. "Wait, don't be rash." After saying that, Mingji released a trace of dark power into the door. After a long time, seeing that there was nothing unusual in the door, Mingji finally felt relieved and said, "Go in. There shouldn't be any danger." "Thank you." Lung Ruoxue was a little speechless. Of course, she knew that there was no danger. However, she still had to thank him for his kind intentions. After walking through the small door, there was indeed a warehouse. However, this warehouse was not a normal warehouse because it contained the many years of collection of the Dead Sea Master. There were all the precious ores and medicinal herbs that the First Elder and Shinhua had considered as valuable. It was a pity that they were all piled on the ground like trash. When the First Elder, Shinhua, and the rest saw them, they immediately pounced over with heartache. What a waste! It was really a waste of God's gift. How could such a good thing be piled up like garbage? After the First Elder, Shinhua, and the rest pounced forward, they did not think about anything else and immediately stored the ores and medicinal herbs into their storage rings. Lung Ruoxue's beautiful eyes searched around, wanting to find the surprise that Qingju had mentioned. Thanks, just as Lung Ruoxue was looking left and right, she suddenly heard a roar. "Don't act rashly or I'll kill him." Hearing this voice, Lung Ruoxue immediately turned around and saw that Jiang Ning was being held as a hostage by a man in black. A shiny knife was placed on Jiang Ning's neck. As for the person who was holding on to Jiang Ning, she found him familiar. Heaven-breaking. Uncle Long recognized the person and reminded Lung Ruoxue, "You're actually not dead yet." Lung Ruoxue asked in disbelief. Wasn't this guy sent to the Nether prison by the evildoer to be taken care of? Why did he appear in the Dead Sea City? Beauty, do you want me to die so much? I've missed you so much these days. I can't live without you for even one day. Patian gritted his teeth and glared at Lung Ruoxue like a venomous snake. His feelings towards Lung Ruoxue were rather complicated. He could not wait to tear Lung Ruoxue into pieces, but at the same time, he wanted to make her his. However, when he saw Lung Ruoxue now, he was reminded of the humiliation he had suffered in this godforsaken place. Thus for a moment his hatred for Lung Ruoxue prevailed. I see. Then don't think about me. Lung Ruoxue said with a smile after listening to Patian. Beauty, do you really think so? Unfortunately, I won't be able to fulfill your wish. Patian laughed maniacally as if he had just done something great. Lung Ruoxue was speechless. Then, Patian pointed at Jiangning, who he had caught, and said, Beauty, do you want to save him? I don't. Lung Ruoxue did not hesitate at all, and went straight to the point. Patian didn't expect Lung Ruoxue to answer so readily. He choked on his words and swallowed the rest of his words. Beauty, how can you be so heartless? Isn't he your friend? Patian was so angry that he was grinding his teeth. However, Lung Ruoxue still put on an indifferent look and smiled faintly. You're wrong, he's not my friend, he's a rice weevil. If you want him, just take it. I can save a lot of food by taking care of one less person. Yup. There won't be anyone snatching herbs from me in the future. Shen Nua also echoed. When Jiangning heard their words, he put on a depressed expression and said, I knew you've long despised me. Warrior, why don't you take me away? Although I can eat a little, seeing how wise and powerful you are. You shouldn't let me go hungry, right? I'm an alchemist. As long as you can provide me with enough herbs, I can refine pills for you. How about it? It'll be very useful. Don't hesitate anymore. Yeah, that's right. Hurry up and take this guy away. We're giving him to you. The Great Elder and the others continued to jeer, all of them putting on an indifferent expression. Seeing them like this, Mingji's mouth twitched. Were these people really together? Why did it sound like he was sending the god of plague away? However, he was still quite surprised to be able to meet familiar faces from Lung Ruoxue and the others in the Master of the Dead Sea's treasure vault. You guys. Patian was so angry that he was about to explode. Although these people were talking nonstop, what they were expressing was that he should take the hostage away quickly. This fact made him extremely depressed. He couldn't help but wonder if he had caught the wrong person. So what if the other party was an alchemist? What he wanted now was not alchemists, but a heavyweight hostage so that he could escape from the hands of these people. But now, it seemed that his idea had become an extravagant hope. No, he wasn't willing to surrender. Originally, he had hidden here in the hope of avoiding the netherworm's pursuit. He did not expect to encounter Lung Ruoxue and the others. These fellows were definitely more difficult to deal with than the netherworms, and were even more terrifying. Potion's mind word, and then he made up his mind. The knife in his hand moved closer to Jiangning's neck, and he threatened. You really don't care about his life? Chapter 2537. Beauty, do you want to save him? 3. Didn't I tell you? Lung Ruoxue's face was filled with helplessness. You think he'll believe you? Patian sneered. Then what do you want? Lung Ruoxue was tormented by him to the point where she could not even get angry. You guys make way, I'm leaving. Patian's eyes turned and he suddenly said. Lung Ruoxue and the rest were stunned when they heard Patian changing the topic. Don't tell them that this fellow had captured a hostage just so he could escape this place smoothly? If that was the case, they would be greatly disappointed. However, the truth was cruel. That was the original intention of Patian to capture the hostage. However, after Lung Ruoxue and the others' performance, he no longer had any hope for the hostage. On the contrary, the hostage had become a burden to him. He was afraid that Lung Ruoxue and the others would make a move on him at any moment. If that happened, he would be in an even more passive position. All right. We'll let you leave. It's not a big deal. Lung Ruoxue said nonchalantly. Then, she gave Uncle Long and the others a look, and they immediately made way for her. You can leave. We won't do anything to you. Lung Ruoxue declared. You guys aren't going to let me go on purpose and then launch a sneak attack, are you? Puotian was not at ease with Lung Ruoxia's generosity. You're thinking too much. We're both from the divine realm, after all. After coming to this unfamiliar place, isn't it only right for us to help each other? Lung Ruoxia replied matter-of-factly. Humph. You're tactful. Patian believed Lung Ruoxia's sincerity. However, out of caution, he still took Jiangning as a hostage. It wasn't until Ping'an reached the door that he threw Jiangning away and fled the place like an arrow. After being left behind, Jiangning looked at Lung Ruoxia and the rest with a guilty look. I'm sorry, I'm too useless. It's good that you know, Lung Ruoxia said with a straight face on purpose. She wasn't used to Jiangning's sudden apology. However, the next second, she saw Jiangning smiling as if nothing had happened. I knew you would say that. How can a dignified alchemist like me be useless? Hearing this, Lung Ruoxia felt helpless. She knew that Jiangning's apology wasn't sincere. Luckily, she didn't take it seriously. Otherwise, she would have been infuriated. Uncle Long and the others knew what kind of person Jiangning was. So they just sighed and ignored him. They continued to work. On the other hand, Ming Ji had no idea how they interacted with each other. His eyes were wide open as he stared at Jiangning in disbelief. Then he turned to look at Lung Ruoxia. He felt that he had grown up. None of these people are normal. He also sighed and then asked carefully, Miss Lung, are we just going to let that Patian leave like this? Ming Ji did not expect to see a man from the divine realm here. And it seemed that he had a grudge against Lung Ruoxia and the others. This was really beyond his expectations. However, before Lung Ruoxia could answer, Ming Ji heard a scream from outside. It sounded like the one who broke the sky. He felt like he understood. He knew that that person would not leave so easily. As he thought of this, he looked at Lung Ruoxia and the rest with a strange look in his eyes. However, Lung Ruoxia and the rest were still as calm as ever. Jiangning even smiled happily and said, Humph! How dare he take me as a hostage? Oh, let him know why the flowers are so red. Thanks. Minga silently mourned for the heaven breaker for 3 minutes to show her kindness. Yes, compared to these people, I'm really too kind. It was wrong. It should be said that compared to them, the people of Nine Nether Prison were too kind. After witnessing so many things with his own eyes, Ming Ji immediately raised the status of Lung Ruoxia and the others in his heart to the point that they were only second to his lord in his heart. At the same time, he secretly made a decision that no matter what happened, he would stand firmly on the side of these people. These people were too terrifying. Lung Ruoxia and the others had finished packing up the items in the treasure vault. Seeing that Ming Ji was in a daze, they did not disturb him. Uncle Long held the dazed Ming Ji's hand and left with the rest. Outside, the netherworms were almost done playing. The surviving guards and attendants of the city lord's mansion were all on their last breath after being played by them, while the more active ones were Skypiercer. Even though he was already being held by the netherworm's large claws, he was still like a person with ADHD. Seeing him like this, Lung Ruoxia knew that it was Jiangning's doing. Jiangning also smiled and moved closer to Patian. He first gave him a hard kick and then said fiercely, You bastard! How dare you take me as a hostage? Do you have any guts? After saying that, Jiangning took out a handful of pills of different colors, opened Potion's mouth, and stuffed all the pills in his hand into it. Boss, what should we do with these guys? The Nether Dragon's heart trembled as he looked at Jiangning's actions in fear. He then asked for Lung Ruoxia's opinion. Except for the Heaven Splitter, deal with them all. Lung Ruoxia said after some thought. The boss Netherworm responded, and then gave the other netherworms a look. The netherworms cried out again and nimbly leaped into the air, then fell from the air like cannonballs. Bang bang bang. After a few loud bangs, the guards and attendants of the city lord's mansion who were on their last breath finally closed their eyes in happiness. They were finally free. Lung Ruoxia could not help but cover her face when she saw this. She deeply regretted the violence of the netherworms. She was definitely not the one who taught them how to deal with prisoners of war like this. After watching the netherworm's actions, Ming Ji, who had finally managed to stop her wild thoughts, simply shut her mouth and stopped expressing her opinions. The mission has been completed. We can leave now. After the awkwardness, Lung Ruoxue said calmly, "Yes, yes." The crowd responded immediately. Of course, before they left, Lung Ruoxue did not forget to light a fire for the city lord's residence. After the operation ended, the number of survivors in the Dead Sea City, other than Lung Ruoxue and her group, was less than 3 digits. These people were lucky enough to survive because they were staying in the shops or inns that guarded the main street. What happened to the various factions in the Dead Sea City was no longer a secret to them. For a time, the doors of all the shops were tightly closed. The Dead Sea City was filled with a dead aura, which made the already dark Dead Sea City even gloomier. When they returned to the inn, Lung Ruoxue and the rest saw the innkeeper standing at the entrance, trembling as he welcomed them. They shot a glance at the ashen-faced innkeeper, but none of them bothered with him and went straight upstairs. When Lung Ruoxue and the rest returned to their rooms, the innkeeper heaved a sigh of relief. It was only then that he realized that he had broken out in cold sweat, and his clothes had long since been drenched in sweat. No, he could not stay here and wait for death. The innkeeper quickly packed up his belongings and fled the inn without looking back. The inn manager ran all the way out of the Dead Sea City. Just as he was hesitating which path was the safest, a huge black shadow blocked his view. He looked up. Oh my God! Isn't that an abyss dragon? Chapter 2538. Beauty, do you want to save him? 4. What are you doing? The inn manager trembled as he spoke. His expression was like a little wife who was about to be snatched away. The abyss dragon glanced down at the inn manager and said with a nonchalant expression, "My boss said that you're only allowed to enter the Dead Sea City. So, you'll have to go back the way you came out." "Ooh, Lord Netherworm, why you should let me go? There's a terrifying killer god in the Dead Sea City. I can't stay here anymore. If you stay here any longer, you won't be able to keep your little life." The inn manager wailed and begged. "Damn it, who's your uncle? Don't randomly claim relatives. Moreover, what does your life have to do with me? You people." Since they dared to live in the Dead Sea City, which one of them was not a wanted criminal who had experienced hundreds of battles and killed countless people? Now you're afraid? Why didn't you know fear when you were bullying others? Don't you know what the Wheel of Fortune is? I'm talking about you guys. The Netherworm roared. Although they were also brutal and bloodthirsty by nature, they would not kill the innocent. This was also the main reason why they could live well even though their hands were stained with blood. After all, the Nether prison didn't restrict killing, but there was a limit. If they crossed the boundary, they would be wanted. As for the people of the Dead Sea City, although they were wanted by the courts of hell, they were still alive and kicking because they were under the protection of the Master of the Dead Sea. But now I'm afraid even the Master of the Dead Sea can't save them. As the Abyss Dragon thought of this, it raised its tail high at the same time, throwing the crying inn manager back into the Dead Sea City. Unable to leave and unable to complain tearfully, the inn manager could only return to the inn with his tail between his legs. However, he was quite pleased that he was not the only one who received such treatment. In reality, they were thinking too much. Lung Ruoxue's target was the various major factions in the Dead Sea City. At that time, they were not among the factions, so Lung Ruoxue naturally would not attack them alone. It was a pity that they had done too many bad things, and were extremely guilty. They were afraid that the other party would kill them all. Thus, they were so terrified that their hearts were in their throats. They did not know how many more days they could see the sun. At the same time, Nethersword and the others had finally arrived at the Dead Sea City after a long and arduous journey. However, they were extremely nervous. When they entered the city, they suddenly realized that the situation they had expected did not happen. Dead Sea City was silent. When they saw that no one was collecting the entrance fee at the city gate, they were puzzled for a while. But now that they saw that there was no one breathing in the Dead Sea City, they were not only puzzled but also shocked. Thanks what happened? Nethersword and the others' hearts sank. If Lung Ruoxue and the others had not arrived, they naturally would not have to worry. However, when they thought about how they should have already arrived and how the Dead Sea City had such a scene, their hearts could not help but ache. He just couldn't let go. If Lung Ruoxue were to lose even a single strand of hair, they did not dare to imagine the terrifying consequences. Nethersword and the others were burning with anxiety as they searched the city without restraint. Finally, they found a few people in a hidden corner who were trembling in fear like chicks that had just been hatched. After asking for the reason, Nethersword and the others were all dumbfounded. A goddess of slaughter led a group of gods of slaughter and massacred all the major powers in the Dead Sea City? Did they hear wrong? The goddess of killing shouldn't be talking about the master of the Dead Sea. Could it be Lung Ruoxue? When Nethersword and the others first heard this news, their first reaction was disbelief. They were very clear about the power of the various forces in the Death Sea. In addition, with the support of the master of the Death Sea, the evil forces were like fish in water. Just by stomping their feet on the Death Sea, it was enough to cause trouble for outsiders. Hence, they could not believe that the goddess of slaughter that these people were talking about was Lung Ruoxue. Even now, the courts of hell had not been able to eradicate the various forces in the Death Sea. Could it be that Lung Ruoxue had managed to do it in such a short period of time? In reality, what they didn't know was that it wasn't strange for Lung Ruoxue to be able to do all this, because she had too many tricks up her sleeve. On the other hand, they couldn't do it. Other than the hardware, if they really wanted to destroy the forces in the Death Sea, they would have to pay a huge price. The main reason was that all those forces were under the protection of the Master of the Death Sea. Naturally, the Master of the Death Sea would not just stand by and watch as the people from the courts of hell killed all his subordinates. However, the troublesome Master of the Death Sea was not around, and Lung Ruoxue and the others had many tricks up their sleeves. Thus, the major powers of the Death Sea were the unlucky ones. Furthermore, Lung Ruoxue treated the Master of the Death Sea as a third party, so she would not show any mercy. With so many factors added together, Lung Ruoxue had succeeded, but Nethersword and the others were shocked. Using the clues they had, Nethersword and the others found the inn where Lung Ruoxue and the others were staying. They asked the inn manager, who was also trembling with fear, for the location of Lung Ruoxue and the others' rooms before they went upstairs. It was Minga who opened the door. Seeing Nethersword and the others, Mingji showed a rare smile. "You guys are so slow." These words made Nethersword and the others feel indignant. However, the most important thing now was to confirm what they had heard. After greeting Lung Ruoxue and the others, they pulled Mingji along to get to know each other. Chapter 2539, Master of the Death Sea 1. After communicating with Mingji for a long time, Nethersword and the others finally confirmed what they had heard. It was all true. Oh my god! The goddess of killing was actually Lung Ruoxue. Such a fact still greatly agitated Minga and the others, who had already been mentally prepared. Ooh! Why did they come so late? What if he missed the moment when the goddess of slaughter showed her might? From Mingji's description, they could already imagine how violent Lung Ruoxue and the others were. However, they still felt regretful that they had not seen it with their own eyes. As such, they were filled with envy, jealousy, and hatred for Mingji, who had participated in the entire process. In fact, Mingji was also quite aggrieved. She even envied them for not being there at the time. If they weren't there, they wouldn't have been provoked. Could they imagine how depressed they were at that time? Minga truly felt that he was just a passerby, because Lung Ruoxue and the others were much more violent than him. Unfortunately, they only heard the glory of his participation in the whole process, but they could not understand his feelings as a soy sauce. Minga sighed. If these people really participated, they wouldn't be envious of him, he promised. However, at this moment, Nethersword and the others couldn't understand the truth of his idea. After hearing Mingji's retelling, Nethersword and the others looked at Lung Ruoxue and the others with burning eyes, as if they were dogs looking at a dog's bones. It made Lung Ruoxue and the others' hair stand on end. Very quickly, Nethersword and the rest stuck to Uncle Long and the others, insisting on getting closer to them. This was especially so after they saw Potion's misfortune. Alchemists like Jiang Ning and Shin Nua became their main targets. As for Lung Ruoxue, they didn't dare to pester her. Lung Ruoxue, who had nothing to do, saw that everyone was busy, so she could only go and find trouble. At this time, Patian was locked up in a guest room. Patian, who was tied up, was in an extremely sorry state. His body and face were covered in scratch marks, and his clothes were also torn and tattered. He had once been a handsome and elegant young master, but now he was no different from a beggar. When she saw Patian, Lung Ruoxue first sized him up carefully. After expressing her sympathy, Lung Ruoxue then said indifferently, "Patian, how are you?" "Very well, beauty. It won't be long before you'll be like me, a prisoner." Patian, who had his eyes closed, opened them after hearing Lung Ruoxue's words. His eyes were spitting fire as he spoke fiercely. "A prisoner? Whose is it?" Lung Ruoxue was curious when she heard this. "Ha! Of course, it belonged to the master of the Death Sea. So you won't be able to be happy for long." Patian roared with grief and indignation. He was filled with hatred. He could have escaped, but who knew that the abyss dragons in the city lord's residence were in cahoots with Lung Ruoxue? This fact almost drove him mad. "Are you sure that the master of the Death Sea can capture me?" Lung Ruoxue blinked her eyes and continued to fish for information. Of course, even the Dark Lord of the Nine Nether prison can't do anything to the master of the Dead Sea, much less you. Ha ha ha. As he spoke, Puotian laughed wildly again. "You're so sure of my fate? It seems that I really can't kill you now. I have to keep you alive, and let you see if I will become a prisoner of the master of the Dead Sea." Lung Ruoxue said calmly. After she finished speaking, she gave Patian a meaningful look and turned to leave. In the next few days, the Dead Sea remained terrifyingly silent. Lung Ruoxue even suspected if the master of the Death Sea had received the news. Why had he not appeared yet? She was getting a little impatient. Thanks Mingji wanted to tell her that the master of the Dead Sea must have received the news, but he would not be back for a while. He was sure that his lord had delayed the master of the Dead Sea. Otherwise, they would not have waited for so many days in vain. Lung Ruoxue was also very stubborn. She would not leave until she saw the master of the Dead Sea. Actually, if it was possible, he really wanted to persuade Lung Ruoxue to leave the Dead Sea city temporarily. However, whenever he faced Lung Ruoxue, he would think of their group's violence, and he would not be able to say this no matter what. Furthermore, he was also worried about his lord and the others. If his guess was correct, his lord and the others should be with the master of the Dead Sea. AI. Master of the Dead Sea, hurry up and appear. Mingji believed that if the master of the Dead Sea could roll back in time, his master might also appear. That way, everyone would be happy. After Mingji thought it through, he waited for the Lord of the Dead Sea to appear every day. However, after waiting for several days, he still did not see the Lord of the Dead Sea. He could not help but feel a little disappointed. He was so furious that he rushed out of the inn and started to wreak havoc in the Dead Sea city. When Nethersword and the others saw him like this, they only thought that he was mentally unstable. As he went crazy, the few shops in the Dead Sea city were instantly filled with holes and were in terrible condition. Many shops even collapsed directly, and the survivors hiding in the shops screamed and ran away like rats. For a time, the scene became chaotic again. Seeing this, Nethersword and the others were also itching to fight. They specifically picked on the survivors who were running around, toying with them but not killing them, causing those survivors to be filled with grief and anger. "Ooh, kill us!" Someone cried and shouted. Such days were really too painful. They couldn't take it anymore. Unfortunately, how could Nethersword and the others be manipulated by others? Therefore, their wish could only become an extravagant hope. Nethersword and the others chased after the few survivors like cats and mice. All of a sudden, dark clouds gathered above the Dead Sea city, and lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Thick black clouds churned and covered the entire Dead Sea city, causing the already dim Dead Sea city to turn pitch black as if it was a dark day. When Minga and the others saw this, they immediately became vigilant. They stopped what they were doing and maintained a vigilant posture. Lung Ruoxue and the others were also attracted by the strange scene outside. Who has the guts to cause trouble in my Dead Sea city? At this moment, an unusually angry roar was heard by Lung Ruoxue and the others. That roar carried a powerful pressure, causing Lung Ruoxue and the rest to feel the pressure. Those who were slightly weaker immediately turned pale, and felt a heavy pressure on their chests, as if a huge rock was pressing down on them. Ming Ji and the others felt that something was amiss. They immediately moved to Lung Ruoxue and the other's side, and released their own pressure to block the attack for them. The Master of the Death Sea? Lung Ruoxue's beautiful eyes flashed as her mood lifted. The mistress had finally appeared. However, this mistress seemed to be very strong. Lung Ruoxue did not know if she could defeat her. I am the Master of the Death Sea. A tall, beautiful, and sexy woman appeared before everyone. Lung Ruoxue sized up the Master of the Death Sea and could not help but think, she is indeed a beauty. Not only was her face beautiful, but her figure was also so hot that it was daunting. She looked at the other person's huge, shapely chest and then looked at her own. Lung Ruoxue was shocked to realize that she seemed to have an inferiority complex. More importantly, this Master of the Death Sea was not just a pretty face. He was a truly powerful expert. Her abilities were even above hers, so she had no confidence in going up against Lung Ruoxue. However, in order to defend her man's territory, she would never admit defeat. Chapter 2540. Master of the Death Sea 2. At the same time, the Lord of the Death Sea's gaze landed on Lung Ruoxue. With one look, the Lord of the Death Sea was stunned beyond words. He did not expect such a beautiful woman to exist in this world. Looking at Lung Ruoxue, the Lord of the Death Sea said, "Beauty, how about you submit to me?" Lung Ruoxue's face was filled with black lines. Was she being teased? The one who was teasing her was a woman? Uncle Long and the others were also at a loss. Was it appropriate for a woman to flirt with another woman? Yield to her? How? In contrast to Lung Ruoxue and the rest, who were shocked, Ming Ji and the rest roared in anger. "You shameless ladyboy, don't even think about our future Netherworld Empress. The Lord will not let you off." Master He couldn't even protect himself now. How could he still care about the bowtie's safety? "Beauty given to me. Big brother will definitely treat you well," the Death Sea Master said without a care. Initially, when Lung Ruoxue heard that the evildoer could not even save himself, she was extremely furious. However, when she heard the word brother, her nerves tensed up. What brother? Lung Ruoxue could not understand. However, she didn't think too much about it, because sometimes, she also called herself a lord in front of a demon. The woman in front of him was probably a queen. Otherwise, she wouldn't have called him brother in front of her. However, she wasn't interested in this brother of hers. At the thought of this, Lung Ruoxue smiled faintly and said, "Death Sea Master, do you think I will believe your words? I know better than you what kind of strength my man has. What a beauty! It's a good thing that you're so confident, but when you truly know my strength, you won't think this way anymore. So, while this lord hasn't gotten angry yet, quickly throw yourself into my arms." The Master of the Death Sea continued to tempt him without any anger. "Don't even think about it." Lung Ruoxue was very stubborn. She had no interest in women. "Right, don't even think about it. My master will definitely take care of you." Nethersword also said angrily, "It seems like you guys won't give up until you see the Dead Sea. Since you don't believe me, I'll show you the situation of the master you speak of." The Master of the Dead Sea laughed. As he finished speaking, a screen of light appeared in the pitch-black night sky. Following that, 3 young men appeared on the screen. "Freak!" Lung Ruoxue's eyes widened as she stared at the screen in disbelief. "Besides my lord, Mingzi and Muli City Master are also here," Nethersword said. On the screen, the 3 of them were sitting on the ground in a circle. It was unknown what they were talking about, but it could be seen that the 3 of them looked quite depressed. "Haha. Not bad. They're all here and they're my prisoners now. It won't be long before they're swallowed by my Death Sea water. At that time, you won't be able to see them anymore, and the 9 Nether prison will be my world." The Master of the Death Sea laughed maniacally as he looked at Lung Ruoxue with eyes filled with determination. "You're dreaming. As long as I'm here, 9 Nether prison will never fall into your hands." Lung Ruoxue was enraged. The consequences would be severe. However, the Master of the Death Sea did not take Lung Ruoxue's anger to heart. Instead, he chuckled and said, "Beauty, you're merely a divine emperor. I can crush you to death with a finger." What right do you have to be so confident? But don't worry, I can't bear to kill you. In the future, you'll still be the Nether Queen of the 9 Nether prison. And I'll naturally be the Dark Lord. Thanks, keep daydreaming. Lung Ruoxua laughed coldly. After she finished speaking, she attacked without a second thought. In an instant, a small flame turned into a ray of dark light, and teleported towards the Master of the Dead Sea. When the Master of the Dead Sea saw how small the flame was, he thought that Lung Ruoxua was just playing with him and did not take it seriously. However, when the flame actually burned her clothes, she felt that something was wrong. The flame was too hot. Damn it. The Death Sea Master felt a sharp pain from the burn. With a pull of her hand, she tore her clothes apart, and a white naked body appeared in front of everyone. Then she said with a perverted smile, "Beauty, if you want to see my naked body, just say it. Why set fire to it?" Fuck. When Lung Ruoxua heard this, she really wanted to curse. Not only that, but these words also made her feel a little familiar, because she seemed to have heard it from Potion's mouth. No wonder the two of them were together. However, he was also lucky to meet such a beautiful and sexy woman in the 9 Nether prison. Lung Ruoxua unceremoniously scanned the Master of the Dead Sea's body. Suddenly, she could not help but widen her eyes. What was that thing below the Death Sea Master's waist? Lung Ruoxua suspected that her eyes were playing tricks on her. She pulled the nether sword, who was the closest to her, and asked with uncertainty, "Do you see that thing below her waist?" Hearing this question, Nether Sword lowered his head in embarrassment. He didn't know how to answer. Uncle Long and the others quickly looked up at the sky to prevent Shuer from asking them. Actually, they had all seen the thing below the Death Sea Master's waist. When they first saw it, they were quite shocked. However, they immediately thought of the innocent Lung Ruoxua. Hence, they acted as if nothing had happened, afraid that they would arouse Lung Ruoxua's curiosity. However, things had already gone against their wishes, and Lung Ruoxua still discovered it. "I'm asking you a question." Seeing that Nether Sword did not reply, Lung Ruoxua gritted her teeth and said, "I see it." Nether Sword said in a low voice, "Isn't she a woman?" Lung Ruoxua roared. These words were heard by everyone present, including the Master of the Death Sea. However, the Master of the Death Sea only smiled lewdly as if he was proud of it. "Beauty, I'll tell you. I can be a man and a woman whenever I want." "Haha, you must be envious." The Master of the Death Sea laughed complacently. "Envy my ass. You ladyboy." Lung Ruoxua's heart felt as if there were thousands of alpacas galloping. This fact almost drove her crazy. Although in her previous world, transvestites were not rare, she had never seen one with her own eyes. Now that she had seen one, she only felt nauseated. No one actually told her that the Master of the Death Sea was a transvestite. Not only that, she was even teased by a transvestite. Really, uncle can endure it, aunt can't. The furious Lung Ruoxua's white and tender fingertips suddenly had a few small flames dancing around them. Finally, the small flames merged together and formed a ball of fire the size of a baby's fist. In the next second, the ball of fire was thrown out by Lung Ruoxua, and it went straight for the Master of the Dead Sea. When the Dead Sea Lord saw the hot-tempered beauty set fire again, it would be a lie to say that she wasn't depressed. One must know that even though she was strong, she hated fire the most. However, the beauty in front of her was a frequent arsonist, so much so that she couldn't guard against it. This time, the temperature of the ball of fire was obviously much higher than the small flame last time, which made her a little angry. However, she, who was full of tender feelings for women, could not bear to lay her hands on such a beauty, so she could only hide. Chapter 2541. Master of the Death Sea 3. Unfortunately, Lung Ruoxua had made up her mind this time. How could she let her escape so easily? After she dodged it once, the ball of fire that was rather spiritual started to chase after her. When the Death Sea Master saw that he couldn't avoid it, his anger started to rise. "Beauty, you forced me to do this." Before the Master of the Death Sea exploded in anger, he even greeted Lung Ruoxua politely. However, Lung Ruoxua did not even look her in the eye. Upon seeing this, the Death Sea Master did not hold back anymore. In the next moment, The master of the Dead Sea shattered into pieces in front of Lung Ruoxue and the rest. It turned into tiny bits and disappeared into the air. She's escaping? Lung Ruoxue was dumbfounded. We're not sure. Ming Ji said with an apologetic look. The Death Sea Master had always been cunning, so they did not know how many tricks he had up his sleeve. Even Minga and the others didn't know? Lung Ruoxue was a little depressed. All of a sudden, Lung Ruoxue and the rest felt the ground beneath their feet shake violently. This sudden earth-shaking and mountain-shaking shake caused them to float in the air vigilantly. However, in the blink of an eye, the entire ground started to surge upwards again. Lung Ruoxue and the rest had no choice but to continue rising. However, the ground seemed to have sensed them and kept following them. At this moment, a pitch-black hole appeared on the ground. Black chi swirled around it, giving it a sinister and terrifying appearance. Following that, a few huge claws extended out from the hole. Each of the claws was as thick as an adult's waist. There were suction cups on the claws, and on each suction cup, there were 2 rows of sharp teeth that opened and closed in a devouring motion. In the next second, the claws flew towards Lung Ruoxue. Be careful. When Uncle Long and the others saw this, they were extremely worried. They used all their strength to teleport towards Lung Ruoxue's direction. However, the moment they moved, they were sensed by those huge claws. A few of them immediately changed their direction and attacked Uncle Long and the others. Uncle Long, be careful. Don't worry about me. Seeing this, Lung Ruoxue hurriedly shouted. She quickly gathered a few fireballs in her hands and threw them at the claws. The giant claws sensed the threat of the fireballs. After a moment of hesitation, they immediately changed their direction and attacked the others. Lung Ruoxue saw that those disgusting claws had actually retreated, and decided to take the initiative to attack. A sword that was as thin as a cicada's wing, and exuded a frosty aura appeared in Lung Ruoxue's slender hand. Without any hesitation, Lung Ruoxue shot out several meteor sword showers that turned into specks of starlight and flew towards the claws that were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. There were many meteor sword showers, and no matter how hard the claws tried to dodge, many of them still landed on their bodies. The claws were in pain and immediately retreated back into the ground. What kind of monster is this? Uncle Long couldn't help but ask curiously when he saw the claws retreat. Dead Sea's deep octopus, the pet of the Lord of the Dead Sea. Minga said honestly. An octopus? Lung Ruoxue understood. He was quite big. An octopus of this size was definitely an overlord of the deep sea, invincible in the sea. The octopuses in the sea are very annoying, Uncle Long said with a look of disdain. Although he was also an overlord of the sea, he was also helpless against the difficult octopus, who asked him to have so many claws. The octopuses in the sea are quite annoying. What do we do now? Lung Ruoxue looked at the crowd and asked. Thanks, Uncle Long and the others were not familiar with the Dead Sea, so they naturally could not think of a good idea. So, everyone turned their heads to Ming Ji and the others. Minga and the others immediately felt a headache. The power of the Master of the Death Sea was undoubted. Other than his lord, it was difficult for them to pose a threat to the Master of the Death Sea. However, his lord was clearly trapped by the Master of the Death Sea. Hence, saving his lord had become a top priority. Lung Ruoxue's thoughts were the same as theirs. However, how to save the demon was a huge problem. According to Ming Song and the others, the Dead Sea was located underground, and it was also the true base camp of the Lord of the Dead Sea. In the Dead Sea, other than the Dead Sea's pet, the Dead Sea Deep Octopus, there were also many overlords of the sea, who were under the command of the Lord of the Dead Sea. If they went into the sea, they would not have any advantage at all. They might even become fish that walked right into the net, allowing the Lord of the Dead Sea to do whatever he wanted. Lung Ruoxue also knew that the sea was the world of the sea beasts. If they, a bunch of non-swimmers, went down, they would be sending their heads to the sea beasts. However, if they did not go down, and the Lord of the Dead Sea did not come up, such a stalemate would be extremely disadvantageous to them. The evildoer and the others were still in the hands of that dead Renyao. If that dead Renyao's bestial nature was triggered, wouldn't the evildoer's innocence be lost? No. She had to think of a way to force the Lord of the Dead Sea to come up. Lung Ruoxua thought about it in detail, and glanced at the Dead Sea City that was riddled with holes. The Dead Sea City was already in a state of ruin. After that, the Lord of the Dead Sea caused a huge earthquake. The current Dead Sea City was simply too horrible to look at. In that case, there was no need to keep the Dead Sea City. The moment this thought appeared in her mind, Lung Ruoxua immediately moved Uncle Long and the rest into the house. Then she took out a few explosive balls and threw them into the crack that looked like the mouth of a giant beast. Following that, Lung Ruoxua teleported out of the Dead Sea City. After a few loud bangs, the dilapidated Dead Sea City became history in the Nether prison as it fell into the Dead Sea. The dark Dead Sea finally surfaced. The area of the Dead Sea was extremely large. After the Dead Sea City fell to the bottom of the sea, the water of the Dead Sea surged up without any obstruction. In an instant, it flooded the land within 100 miles of the Dead Sea City. After the water of the Death Sea had calmed down, Lung Ruoxua found a safe place to land. Then she moved Uncle Long and the rest out. This is the Dead Sea? Looking at the black ocean in front of him, Uncle Long sighed. The Dead Sea was much bigger than the endless ocean. However, it was obvious that this was not a good place. The ocean was black, and the most important thing was that it emitted a foul smell, which was unbearable. Young Lady Lung, the Dead Sea has surfaced. What should we do now? Minga asked helplessly. What is the Death Sea Master most afraid of? Lung Ruoxua asked. He should be afraid of fire. The beasts in the water are all afraid of fire. Uncle Long interrupted before Ming Ji could answer. Are you afraid of fire? Then let's dry the water of the Death Sea. I don't believe that the Lord of the Death Sea can still keep his eyes closed. Lung Ruoxua said fiercely. Hearing Lung Ruoxua's answer, Ming Ji and the other local tyrants of the Nether prison were speechless. Dry the water of the Death Sea? That was a good idea, but was that even possible? The Dead Sea was so big. What kind of fire could dry this place up? How much fire would he have to use? With such a grand undertaking, Minga and the others thought that this was clearly a heavenly night lake. But then, the many phoenixes and fire dragons that appeared in front of them made them widen their eyes in shock. And their mouths could not close for a long time. What was he trying to do? Ming Ji and the others were dumbfounded and could not speak for a long time. Could it be what they were thinking? Chapter 2542. The First Negotiation 1. Oh my God. If it was really as they thought, then it would be too terrifying. Ming Ji and the others, who had finally regained their senses, couldn't help but shiver. They tried hard to recall if they had offended Lung Ruoxua in any way. As for Nethersword, who had once offended her, he was so shocked that he broke out in a cold sweat. Oh, it's a good thing that she didn't really want to kill me. Otherwise, I'm afraid I would have turned into ashes long ago. Following Lung Ruoxua's command, the phoenixes and fire dragons started to breathe fire towards the surface of the Dead Sea. The scene was extremely grand and intimidating. Not only were Nethersword and the others scared half to death, even Uncle Long and the others were stunned. To be honest, this was the first time they had seen such a scene. It seemed like Schwer was really angry. Yes, Lung Ruoxua was furious. The consequences must be severe. Didn't the damned Renyao shrink back? Then she would think of a way to force him out. She didn't believe that the damned Renyao would still be able to stay in the Dead Sea after drying the water. Although she knew that her side would suffer losses in this way, it didn't matter. She had medicinal pills, enough for all the phoenixes and fire dragons to recover their divine power. In short, no matter how long it takes, she must force the Lord of the Dead Sea out. Otherwise, how can she save the demon? Later on, what Nethersword and the others saw was the phoenixes and fire dragons in the sky, elegantly breathing fire as they poured medicinal pills into their mouths. Seeing them madly eating medicinal pills, Nethersword and the others, who had barely enough medicinal pills in their bags, were filled with envy, jealousy, and hatred. It was a pity that they did not have the fire element. The phoenixes and fire dragons in the sky were tossing and turning with all their might. The flames on the surface of the sea had never been extinguished from the beginning. As for the Dead Sea beasts, who initially didn't take this action to heart, as the number of days the flames burned increased, and the sea water became hotter and hotter. They slowly began to be unable to bear it. "Master, master, save us!" The sea beasts knelt before the Lord of the Dead Sea and cried. "Everyone calm down. It's just some flames. What can they do to dry up the seawater?" The master of the Dead Sea, who was in his deep-sea palace, looked at his subordinates in exasperation. He did not know what to say. In fact, she was also slightly uneasy, but she absolutely did not believe that the beauty outside had the ability to roast the entire Dead Sea dry. She thought that it wouldn't be long before the phoenixes and fire dragons were exhausted. However, how could there be so many phoenixes and fire dragons around the beauty? She couldn't help but feel deeply puzzled. After hearing her words, the sea beasts all cried out, "Master, the sea is getting hotter. If this continues, we'll be cooked." Hearing this, the master of the Death Sea immediately put on a straight face and said unhappily, "Cooked? It was so easy to roast you. How come I didn't know that your defense is so weak? Your Highness, we're sea beasts after all. Fire is our natural enemy." A large octopus said with a wronged expression, "Thanks, so what? Don't be scared by that woman outside. She wants to dry the Dead Sea? Isn't that a fool's dream? Therefore, you must hold on and not let the Dead Sea's name be tarnished." The Death Sea Master said with a face of disappointment. Actually, she wasn't too sure about Lung Ruoxia's methods. However, she wouldn't lose face. She wouldn't allow others to destroy her own prestige. Furthermore, she didn't believe that Lung Ruoxia could really dry up the entire Dead Sea. Moreover, she still had a hostage in her hands. Therefore, she was confident. "And master, we'll try our best." All the sea beasts had pitiful looks on their faces as they said weakly, "Woo." It wasn't that they didn't want to be stronger, but they were afraid that they wouldn't be able to hold on. It should be known that none of the beasts in the sea liked fire, as it was their natural enemy. Now that the entire surface of the Dead Sea was covered in scorching flames, they couldn't escape even if they wanted to. They could only hide in the deep sea and wait to be slaughtered. When would such a life end? Could there still be a head? They were not as optimistic as their master. To the sea beasts, the woman outside was truly too terrifying. They were all scared out of their wits, especially when they heard from their boss, Dead Sea Xinjiang, that the woman was very powerful. Their fear of Lung Ruoxia naturally deepened. As for their boss, Dead Sea Deep Zhang, ever since he returned from the defeat, he had been cooped up in his lair without moving. It was unknown if he was sad or what, but he did not come out. This fact made them even more anxious. Since that's the case, go back to your posts. Remember, don't let the divine realms people look down on you. The Death Sea Master warned with a serious expression. Yes, the sea beasts resentfully left. Since the matter had not been resolved, they could only obediently stay in their nests and wait for their deaths. Woo. The unknown fate left them at a loss. After his subordinates left, the master of the Death Sea smashed a small table beside him. His face was filled with rage and violence. This rage was naturally not because of his cowardly subordinates, but because of Lung Ruoxia and the others. She didn't expect that even though she had retreated to the Dead Sea and made a concession, those people outside were still chasing after her relentlessly. Were they trying to kill her? It was really too detestable. Fortunately, she had a hostage in her hands, so she wasn't too passive. Otherwise, she really didn't know what to do with those people outside. However, what worried her the most was the raging flames of anger burning outside. She hated fire but was also afraid of fire. Otherwise, when Lung Ruoxia released fire, she would not have retreated to the Dead Sea in a fit of anger and sent out Dead Sea Xinjiang. She thought that little Zhang's tough skin and thick flesh would be able to withstand it, but who knew that little Zhang would actually be defeated and return? Faced with such a reality, the master of the Death Sea was rather depressed. Then she stood up and walked out of the palace, coming to a place covered with a transparent light net in the deep sea. That light net was one of her talents, called the devouring net. It was specially used to imprison people. It was very similar to a barrier, but it was lighter and more convenient. It could also absorb the dark power of others for its own use. And now, 3 young men were trapped in the devouring net. The 3 of them were the demon Ming Ziyi and Mu Li. When they saw that the master of the Death Sea had arrived, The three of them did not even bother with him. They only opened their eyes slightly before lowering their heads and whispering to each other. The master of the Death Sea was not angry when he saw this. He only laughed and said, "The future Nether Empress is truly a beauty. She has such soft skin and tender flesh. I'm very satisfied with her." Hearing this, the evildoer immediately raised his head, narrowed his eyes and said coldly, "What did you just say?" "Mistress Dark, I said that the future Nether Empress of our Nether prison is a great beauty. Her skin is as white as snow, and I like her. She's my woman from now on." The master of the Dead Sea provoked fearlessly. When she saw the extraordinarily handsome man's expression change because of her words, she felt extremely satisfied. Such a feeling also reduced the anger in her heart by a lot. She knew that it was the right decision to come here. Chapter 2543. The First Negotiation 2. You're dreaming. The demon gritted his teeth. If he could, he really wanted to rush up and tear this damned Renyao into pieces, so that she wouldn't be an eyesore. However, such a thought obviously couldn't be realized now. Damn it. The demon was quite depressed. At this time, Mingzi could not help but ask, "You've met the Nether Empress? That's impossible, right?" The Nether Empress was in Jiuyo City, and his lord had repeatedly warned him to protect her. Hence, his rationality told him that this transvestite would not have the chance to meet Lung Ruoxue. However, what disappointed him was that after hearing his question, the master of the Death Sea laughed smugly. "Not only has she seen me, she has also seen my naked body. But she took the initiative to strip me naked. Are you dreaming?" Mingzi didn't believe her when she said that. The demon's face turned even darker. How should he put it? He definitely did not believe the words of the master of the Death Sea. However, he had not returned to Nine Serenities City for such a long time, and Schwer would definitely be worried. She might have really come out to look for him. If that was the case, it would naturally explain why the master of the Death Sea would see her. At this moment, the evildoer regretted hiding it from Schwer. He should have told Schwer the truth. However, if he told the truth, he was afraid that Schwer would also come. Sigh. He was in a conflicted mood. But now, no matter what he thought, it seemed to be of no use. Ha ha ha. How could I be dreaming? To tell you the truth, Lung Ruoxue and I fell in love at first sight, and we've already hooked up. After we've destroyed you all, we can live together and be a pair of immortals. The master of the Death Sea laughed arrogantly. Mingzi only gave the delusional transvestite a disdainful look and ignored her. And even hooked up? He was daydreaming. It would be weird if Lung Ruoxue was interested in her. The demon didn't believe the words of the master of the Dead Sea even more. However, when he heard that a transvestite was fantasizing about his woman, the anger in his heart couldn't help but surge. If a pair of fire-spitting eyes could kill, the master of the Dead Sea would have died thousands of times. The Death Sea master was done showing off and turned to leave in a good mood. After she left, Muli said with a guilty face, "My lord, it's all my fault. If you didn't save me, you wouldn't be in prison. What's the point of saying this now? The most important thing now is to find a way out." The demon deliberately said with a straight face, "That's right. The most important thing is to find a way to get out. Otherwise, we will probably become food for the master of the Dead Sea," said Mingzi. He could already feel that the net was slowly shrinking. With the three of them working together, they could still resist for a while, but if time passed and they used up too much dark power without any replenishment, they would really be in danger. "Don't worry. This broken net won't be a threat to us for a while." After the demon finished speaking, he took out a few bottles of pills and gave them to Mingzi, and Muli. Mingzi immediately felt more confident, as if he had obtained a treasure. With these medicinal pills, he should be able to resist for quite a while. "Master, is that demon Lung Ruoxue here too?" Muli couldn't help but ask. "He should be here." The demon gritted his teeth. It was impossible for the master of the Death Sea to be too far away from the Death Sea. Hence, Schwer must have arrived at the territory of the master of the Death Sea. Otherwise, that damned human demon would not have the chance to see Schwer. Then, Muli didn't dare to say anything. If the little devil lost a single hair, it would be his fault. Woo. He was so regretful. Why did he act so impulsively against the master of the Dead Sea? It was all his fault. Thanks, don't think too much, Schwer will be fine. The demon did not want to see his subordinate blaming himself at this time, so he could only comfort her. Besides, he also believed that with Schwer's means, it would not be easy for the wretched ladyboy to catch her. However, when he heard the wretched ladyboy taking liberties with his woman, the anger in his heart still rushed to the top of his head. When he had the chance, he would definitely cut the wretched ladyboy into 8 pieces. The evildoer who was imprisoned in the deep sea hated the Lord of the Dead Sea. Lung Ruoxue, who was at the shore of the Dead Sea, was still commanding the phoenixes and fire dragons to set fire in an orderly manner. After half a month of burning, the water near the sea was as hot as newly boiled water, and there was a faint umami in the sea. Is it seafood soup? Jiang Ning took a few deep breaths and said, You want to eat it? Lung Ruoxue raised her brows and asked indifferently, I don't want to. Jiang Ning shook his head. The water was so polluted. If he ate the food here, he would have a stomach ache. He didn't want to be abused. I just wanted to add some seasoning to the seafood soup to enhance the taste. Jiang Ning added. Then, he floated above the sea and scattered large amounts of colorful pills into the sea. What a waste. Seeing this, Nethersword couldn't help but ask. Waste? Then should I let you eat? Hearing this, Jiang Ning handed a black pill to Nethersword. I'm not eating. I'm not eating. It's better to leave it for the beasts in the Dead Sea, and that dead human monster to eat. When Nethersword heard this, he was so frightened that his face turned pale. Sob. After being with Lung Ruoxue and the others for so long, he naturally knew that these were all poison. How could he dare to eat them? You're the one who refused to eat it. Don't say I didn't give it to you. After Jiang Ning finished speaking, he returned to the bottom of the sea and continued to scatter the pills. Seeing Jiang Ning throw the pills into the sea, Nethersword's heart ached a little. Although they were poisonous pills that he couldn't eat, it wasn't a bad idea to keep them for his enemies. However, in the face of these fiendish people, he could not open his mouth to ask for it, so he could only obediently shut his mouth. As soon as Jiang Ning's pills entered the sea, a white mist immediately appeared in the sky above the Dead Sea. It even carried a burning smell. The beasts in the Dead Sea were in trouble as well. The seawater that was mixed with various kinds of poison had caused them to show different degrees of symptoms of poisoning. The more serious ones had even died on the spot. This situation was quickly reported to the Death Sea Master. The Master of the Death Sea was burning with rage. However, she was rational enough. She did not rush up to the surface to attack Lung Ruoxue and the others. Instead, she had been racking her brains for a solution. After thinking for a long time, the Master of the Death Sea decided to try using a hostage. This was definitely a trump card that she had prepared to use only when she had no other choice. She would not use it unless she had no other choice. Unfortunately, she had used it in advance, which made her depressed. After making the decision, the Master of the Death Sea suppressed his hatred for flames and decided to negotiate with Lung Ruoxue. When Lung Ruoxue and the rest saw the waves on the sea surface becoming turbulent, they immediately became alert. Following that, they saw waves rising on the pitch-black sea surface and a woman in black clothes standing on the waves. The Master of the Dead Sea endured the boiling water under his feet and put on a calm and composed posture. He revealed a smile that he thought was mesmerizing and teased. Beauty, I'm here. You must miss me. Yup. I've missed you. I can't wait for you to die. Lung Ruoxue returned a smile, and the two of them spoke as if they were having a casual conversation. Chapter 2544. The First Negotiation 3. Ha ha. It's my honor for the beauty to think of me like this. The Death Sea Master laughed even more slyly. Lung Ruoxue looked at the laughed Renyao and wished she could burn him into ashes so that he wouldn't show off in front of her. Unfortunately, now wasn't the time. After all, the 3 evildoers might still be in the hands of this Renyao. Master of the Dead Sea, is the water under your feet not hot? Uncle Long asked curiously. Hot. What's hot? The temperature is just right. I'll take it that you're boiling water for me. Thank you for your hard work. The Death Sea Master said stubbornly. Oh really? It seems that my spirit beasts can work harder and let you enjoy a good sauna. Lung Ruoxua laughed when she heard that. He even wanted to steam her? The master of the Dead Sea was a little angry when she heard this. However, she was always able to maintain a good demeanor in front of a beauty. Hence, she still smiled and said, "There's no need to steam it. Although I'm not afraid of the heat, you have to think about those who are afraid of the heat. Don't forget, the mistress of the dark world is still a hostage in my hands. Wouldn't your heart ache if they were to be roasted?" "I don't feel heartache," Lung Ruoxua said with a face of nonchalance. These words made the master of the Dead Sea, who wanted to fight for the initiative, choke back her words. She even suspected that this beauty was forcefully snatched by the mistress of the dark world. Otherwise, why was it that when she mentioned that the mistress of the dark world was afraid of the heat, not only did the other party look like he didn't care, but she also heard the sound of teeth grinding? The master of the Dead Sea was a little uncertain about the position of the dark mistress in Lung Ruoxua's heart. If she did not care about the life and death of the dark mistress at all, then wouldn't she have worked for nothing? No. She had to get to the bottom of this. "Beauty, do you really not care about that man's life? He and his 2 subordinates are now in my hands." The Death Sea Master reminded. "So what? I don't accept any threats. If you think the hostage in your hands can threaten me, then you're wrong. There were so many men in this world. If he didn't have this, he could just find another one. And without the Dark Lord, with my strength, it won't be difficult for me to dominate 9 Nether Prison. Don't you think?" Lung Ruoxua replied with a smile. "That's true. Beauty. Why don't we join hands and dominate the 9 Nether Prison?" After thinking for a while, the master of the Death Sea said, "You? Why should I bring a transvestite like you along when I can do it myself? Humans and demons cannot cooperate, they must be destroyed. So, you can just wash up and wait for your death." Lung Ruoxua gave the master of the Dead Sea a disdainful look and said indifferently, "You, beauty, it's not that easy to rule the 9 Nether Prison. Without me as your guide, you'll take many detours. More importantly, the Dark Mistress subordinates won't be convinced by you." The master of the Dead Sea did not give up as he tried to convince Lung Ruoxua. He wanted to tie himself together with her. Unfortunately, Lung Ruoxua listened to his words and only sneered. She pointed at Ming Ge and the others and said, "I have a guide. You can ask them if they will submit to me. We will follow Miss Lung's lead." Ming Song did not wait for the Death Sea Master to ask, and took the initiative to express his attitude. Seeing this, Nether Sword and the others nodded. Their attitude proved Lung Ruoxua's words. The mistress of the dark world, and the other 2 who were in the hands of the master of the Dead Sea could not threaten them. When the Death Sea Master saw this, he was about to go crazy. Fuck. Was there no use for hostages? How did this happen? Could it be that these people really didn't care about the lives of the mistress of the dark world? And the other 2? No. She would never believe it so easily. "You're really not afraid that it'll kill the 3 of them?" The master of the Death Sea continued to ask. "Thanks, if you can really kill the mistress of the dark world, then go ahead and try." Ming Ge said with a look of disdain. Did he think that the master of the Dead Sea didn't know that he didn't have the ability to kill the mistress of the dark world? He even dared to come up to them and threaten them with a hostage. Did he really think they were 3-year-old children? Humph. Even though I can't kill the mistress of the dark world, I can still kill the other 2. So, you really don't regret it? The Death Sea Master still refused to give up. "It's our honor to die for the Dark Lord and the future Nether Empress," Ming Song replied with determination. Then he deliberately put on a noble and cold expression as he cast a sidelong glance at the master of the Dead Sea. "You damned Renyao, you heard that?" Lung Ruoxua said with a smile. "You will regret this. You'll definitely regret it." The master of the Dead Sea was furious. The negotiation had failed. However, the furious master of the Death Sea did not waste too much time with Lung Ruoxua and the rest. He retreated back into the sea. Lung Ruoxua and the others were rather suspicious of the master of the Dead Sea's escape. Did this fella escape so easily? They were very disappointed. No matter what, they should at least have a fierce battle before leaving, right? "Miss Lung, we provoked the Lord of the Dead Sea so much just now. What if she were to vent her anger on the three of them? Will the three of them? Mingji asked worriedly. However, he did not finish his sentence, but Lung Ruoxue understood what he meant. Don't worry. The three of them aren't that weak. Lung Ruoxue consoled him. Even though she said that, she wasn't sure what the Master of the Dead Sea would do when he returned. Hence, she was actually very worried about the demon. After the Master of the Death Sea returned to the Death Sea, she did not return to her own palace in her anger. Instead, she went to the light net. When she saw the three of them, she immediately smiled and said, "I'll show you something." With that, the Master of the Death Sea waved his hand, and a light screen appeared above the light net. Following that, Lung Ruoxue's voice appeared on the light screen. It was playing the conversation between the Master of the Death Sea, Lung Ruoxue, and the others. The demon looked at the screen and his heart was in turmoil. Schwer had indeed come to the Dead Sea. However, when he saw that Schwer was safe and sound, and her mental state was not bad, and that the Dead Sea's transvestite was unable to do anything to her, he was relieved. "Don't you have anything to say?" After the images on the screen finished playing, the Master of the Death Sea could not help but ask when he saw that none of the three of them were speaking. "No, I didn't." The demon's expression was as calm as ever. Since Schwer was so calm, he naturally couldn't embarrass her. Besides, other than being temporarily trapped by the light net, this damned Renyao couldn't hurt him at all. Schwer wouldn't be threatened by any Renyao either, so what else did he have to be afraid of? "You two don't have any either?" Knowing that he could not threaten the Dark Lord, the Lord of the Dead Sea turned his attention to Ming Zi and Mu Li. However, the two of them rolled their eyes at her and turned their heads away. Upon seeing this, the Death Sea Master was about to explode from anger. Why were these hateful people so difficult to deal with? Just as the Master of the Dead Sea was feeling extremely depressed, an ugly black fish swam over and cried out, "Master, it's not good. Many of our brothers have been scalded to death. Woo. Master, save me. Ha ha. Just wait to be boiled into soup." Hearing the strange fish's words, Ming Zi said with a gloating expression, "Woo. Master, I don't want to be boiled into soup. Help." The fish monster's face turned ashen as it pleaded for help. Chapter 2545. The first negotiation. When the Death Sea Master saw that his useless subordinate had embarrassed her, he said in exasperation, "Shut up. If you dare to cry again, I'll stew you." The strange fish didn't dare to make a sound. It turned around and swam away like a little wife, choking on its tears. It was here to report the news, so it couldn't be stewed by its master. After all, there were still beautiful fish waiting for it to return home. How detestable. When the Lord of the Dead Sea saw the strange fish turn around and leave, the anger in her heart rose again. However, she was even angrier at the three people in front of her. The temperature of the sea was already extremely high, but the three of them were trapped in the light net by her. The light net was protecting them instead, making them unable to feel the temperature of the sea water outside at all. She was so angry that she felt as if she had shot herself in the foot. But even so, she couldn't remove the light net. Otherwise, she would be the one who would be captured. One must know that she had spent a lot of effort to lure the mistress of the dark world and Ming Zi into a trap and capture them alive. How could she let them escape so easily? However, the Master of the Dead Sea looked at the three of them and felt angry. He glared at the three of them for a while before he turned around and left. Another half a month passed. The fire on the surface of the Dead Sea was still burning red. The number of Dead Sea beasts had increased dramatically, and the temperature of the water had increased. Not only that, after a month of hard work by the phoenixes and fire dragons, the water level of the Dead Sea had dropped significantly. This fact caused the surviving sea beasts to panic. If this continued, the Dead Sea might really be roasted dry. Sitting in the hall at the bottom of the ocean, the Death Sea Master had heard the same words countless times. She was truly sick of hearing it, and she was indeed sick of it. She didn't expect that the other party's beastie would be so powerful. It had dried up 1/5 of the Dead Sea water. It had only been a month. Damn it. If they continue to do this, the Death Sea will cease to exist in less than half a year. As the Master of the Death Sea, How could she allow such a thing to happen? Master, quickly think of a way. The sea beasts were so anxious that they were about to scratch the wall when they saw their master walking around like an ant in a hot pot without saying a word. Sop. What is master still thinking about? They were about to lose their lives. In the past month, they had witnessed the death of countless sea beasts. Although the sea beasts that had been scalded to death were not very strong, the sea water was getting hotter and hotter. Who knew when it would be their turn? After living for so long and showing off their might in the Dead Sea, they were truly afraid. The women outside were too scary. That was a demon-like existence. To be honest, their fear of the mistress of the dark world was not as deep as the fear of the women outside. At least the mistress of the dark world would not have a way to dry the Dead Sea. But that woman could. This would directly take their little lives. Master! The sea beasts couldn't help but call out softly when they saw their master still pacing back and forth. At this time, the leader of the fish guards reported from outside. Master, another 500 guards have died. Thanks, damn it. After hearing what the leader of the fish guards said, the Lord of the Dead Sea finally reacted. Master, you have to think of something quickly. Otherwise, we'll all lose our lives. Seeing that their master had finally reacted, the sea beasts hurriedly said, Do you have any good ideas? The master of the Death Sea asked after hearing this. The sea beasts looked at each other. They couldn't do anything about it. If he had a good plan, he wouldn't have waited until now. Master, why don't we make peace with the evil demons outside? A sea beast in the corner whispered, Peace. When the master of the Dead Sea heard these two words, his heart felt as if it was being sliced by a knife. After the other party had messed up his territory, he still took the initiative to ask for peace? This was really too cowardly. The master of the Dead Sea was rather unhappy with this idea. And the sea beasts, who could tell that she did not look too good, did not dare to respond to this idea. They could only lower their heads and remain silent, in case their master would vent his anger on them. After saying these two words, the sea beast also regretted its own blabbering. Master seemed to be even angrier. It shrank into the corner, trying to reduce its presence. The master of the Dead Sea had been struggling because of the two words make peace. As for Lung Ruoxue and the others who were living a carefree life by the sea, they naturally did not have the time to care about what she was thinking. For the past month, they had had a great time. Especially when they smelled the increasingly strong fishy smell drifting over from the sea. They truly felt that the mission of roasting the Dead Sea was a great success. They believed that it would not be long before the Dead Sea would truly cease to exist. During this period of time, Lung Ruoxue had been thinking about how the master of the Dead Sea would react. However, after seeing that the master of the Dead Sea was still lying at the bottom of the sea without any movement even after a month had passed, she naturally assumed that the ladyboy wanted to fight her to the death. Since that was the case, she had no choice but to sacrifice her life to accompany the transvestite. With this thought in mind, she also threw a small wisp of her flame into the sea. Her flame might be small, but its power was absolutely shocking. In just 2 days, the water in the Dead Sea was rapidly drained. This scene also made Minga and the others tremble with fear. In the past, they had always thought that drying up the water of the Death Sea was an impossible task, but now they did not dare to think that way anymore. What was impossible for others seemed to be rather easy for Lung Ruoxue. Chapter 2546. Inevitable Existence. 1. 3 days after Lung Ruoxue threw her flame into the sea, the master of the Dead Sea could no longer hold it in. With a dark expression, she surfaced once again. Beauty, let's talk. The Death Sea master gritted his teeth and said, Do we have anything to talk about? Lung Ruoxue blinked her eyes and said with an innocent look, Of course there is. Beauty, I know you're here to save the mistress of the dark world and the other two. I'll hand them over to you, and you can remove the flames on the sea. How about it? The master of the Death Sea did not beat around the bush and said directly, Just like this. Lung Ruoxue was obviously not satisfied with this condition. What else do you want? The master of the Death Sea gritted his teeth and asked in anger, You don't have any compensation? Lung Ruoxue smiled faintly. Upon hearing this, the corners of Ming's mouth twitched. Compensation? Didn't they already rob the master of the Dead Sea City Lord residence? Of course, he would not say these words out loud to undermine Lung Ruoxue. He only pitied the unlucky master of the Dead Sea in his heart. When the master of the Dead Sea heard this, he was truly depressed. This woman destroyed his Dead Sea city and killed so many of his subordinates. Now he was willing to exchange hostages, and she still wanted compensation? What the hell is this? He had lived for a long time, but he had never seen such a shameless person. Lung Ruoxue's level of shamelessness was definitely second to none in the 9 Netherworld prison. Seeing that the Death Sea Master did not speak, Lung Ruoxue could only continue to ask. So do you agree? If you agree to return the hostage to me and give me some compensation, I will put away these flames. Otherwise, it won't be long before the Dead Sea disappears from the 9 Netherworld prison. I need to think about it. The Death Sea Master sighed. Then you'd better think quickly. I believe that in at most 3 months, the Death Sea will no longer exist. Lung Ruoxue reminded. I will. The Death Sea Master gritted his teeth and retreated back to the bottom of the sea. The moment he returned to his hall at the bottom of the sea beasts swarmed towards him. They looked at the Lord of the Dead Sea with anticipation and asked, Master, how did the discussion go? They want compensation. The Master of the Death Sea stated this fact calmly. As soon as he finished speaking, a sea beast said impatiently, Then give it to them. Sob, we can't stand this kind of life anymore. The Master of the Dead Sea's face turned black. If she could give it to him, of course she would. However, most of her collection was kept in the Dead Sea City's City Lord's mansion, and that City Lord's mansion had disappeared completely. Now that he was asking her for compensation, where was she going to steal it? Moreover, she was well aware that even a little bit of it would not be able to satisfy that woman's appetite. She was quite depressed. Why didn't such a scheming woman belong to her? She truly felt that she and Lung Ruoxue were a match made in heaven. The two of them were so compatible. They were all so despicable and shameless. Fortunately, Lung Ruoxue did not know that the Master of the Dead Sea thought of her this way. Otherwise, she would be depressed as well. Furthermore, Lung Ruoxue would never want to have any relationship with a transvestite. She would never think that she and a transvestite were a match made in heaven. Thus, the bold and reckless Lord of the Dead Sea was lucky. Otherwise, if he had said these words in front of Lung Ruoxue, he would definitely not have a good ending. Thanks, the Lord of the Dead Sea was in a dilemma in his own palace hall. The sea beasts were frowning. They truly believed that their master was reluctant to compensate them. Thus, after the sea beasts discussed in low voices, one of them spoke up as the representative. Master, we'll pay for the compensation, so you should agree. When he heard this, the Death Sea Master lifted his eyelids and said with a speechless expression, Do you think that little compensation is enough to satisfy that hateful woman? We're willing to compensate you with everything we have. The sea beast continued. As it finished speaking, it opened its mouth and spat out a storage ring. Then, it poured out all the items in the ring and placed them in front of the Death Sea Master. Seeing this, the other beasts followed suit. In a short while, the compensation mentioned by the beasts was placed in front of the Dead Sea Master. Looking at the various items on the ground, the Lord of the Dead Sea's mouth twitched. There was really everything. There was even some food caught by the sea beasts mixed in. It could be seen that these sea beasts were really going all out. However, even she was not interested in such a thing. Would that woman Lung Ruoxue be interested? Did he lack these things? The Master of the Dead Sea did not think much of this compensation. However, this was a kind gesture from the sea beasts. In addition, the sea beasts were all looking at her with anticipation. She was a little embarrassed to reject them. However, these things were really too much for her to take out. Master, we've contributed all our treasures. Seeing that its master was still silent, the sea beast couldn't hold it in any longer. Just tell me if you can or can't. What's the point of pretending to be silent? These things won't do. After a long silence, the Master of the Death Sea finally spoke. No. Why not? These were all good things. You can't buy them even if you have money. Moreover, many of them are specialties of the Dead Sea. They will definitely be satisfied. the sea beast said confidently. These things are really not worth much. Helplessly, the Lord of the Dead Sea could only reveal this cruel fact. He had interacted with humans before, so he naturally knew what they liked the most. These sea grasses and whatnot were definitely not their favorite. Worthless? How could that be? These are all good things. The sea beast, who had been hit hard, was unwilling to believe this fact and mumbled to itself. "AI. Forget it, I'll just take it and show it to that woman. You guys wait for my news." The Lord of the Dead Sea was not willing to see the look on the sea beasts' faces after their fathers died. So he escaped and came out of the sea. Lung Ruoxua didn't expect the transvestite to return so quickly. While she was puzzled, she saw the master of the Dead Sea throw over a few more rings. Just as she was about to reach out to receive them, she was intercepted by the nether sword. "Young Miss Lung, this damned Renyao is not a good thing. Be careful not to be fooled," Nether Sword said with a serious expression. Hearing this, the Death Sea Master's face turned black. Lung Ruoxua was speechless. It was just a few rings. Could it be that they were poisoned? In reality, that was what Nether Sword really thought. He was thinking that if he was poisoned, Lung Ruoxua would definitely have a way to save him. However, if the person who was poisoned was Lung Ruoxua, that would be terrible. So he couldn't take the risk. "Let's see what's inside." Lung Ruoxua nodded her head. She had to appreciate his good intentions. Nether Sword nodded and looked into the ring through his divine sense. His expression immediately changed. "Damned Renyao, why are you giving us these lousy things? This is the compensation we've gathered," the Death Sea Master said emotionlessly. However, he was thinking that he knew that the other party would not be satisfied, and he was right. "Are you trying to send off a beggar? You're using this trash to trick us? Do you think we don't know what's good for you?" The Nether Sword was very angry, and the consequences were very serious. Chapter 2547. Inevitable Existence 2. After hearing Nether Sword's words, Lung Ruoxua took a ring out of curiosity. She used her divine sense to take a look, and her expression changed slightly. The items in this ring were really complete. There were all kinds of strange fish, strange-looking black aquatic grass, and black boulders. He really didn't know where this transvestite had collected all these things. The Master of the Dead Sea's judgment had dropped by quite a bit. The items in the ring were on a completely different level from the items they had obtained from the City Lord's mansion. When Jiangning saw Lung Ruoxua's expression, he took a ring out of curiosity. After looking at it, he couldn't help but ask, "Why did you give us so many fish? We are not interested in the strange fish of the Dead Sea. Those fish are the collection of my subordinates, and so are these things." The Master of the Death Sea thought about it and replied honestly, "Don't tell me you're just using your subordinates' things to trick us? You're so insincere." Hearing this, Nether Sword was instantly enraged. "I want to be sincere, but I don't have the goods. These things were gathered bit by my subordinates. I only hope that you can let them go," the Death Sea Master said pitifully. Was he playing the emotional card? Lung Ruoxua's eyes widened in disbelief. She had thought that this fellow would continue to walk the path of a slut. It turned out that he had changed his approach. "Who are you lying to? You don't have any on hand?" Nether Sword didn't believe the words of the Master of the Dead Sea at all. He knew very well how much money the Dead Sea City could make. "I really didn't. The Dead Sea City is destroyed, and so are my many years of collection," the Master of the Death Sea said with a face full of worry. When she thought of this, she felt her heart ache. Lung Ruoxua fell silent. Would she tell the transvestite that she had taken everything from the City Lord's residence? Of course not. However, she didn't want to see the guy in front of her acting pitiful all the time. He was really too annoying, wasn't he? "It sounds pitiful. Why don't you bring us more seaweed and stones from the bottom of the sea? We don't want the fish." Jiangning pitied Lung Ruoxua and spoke up for her. "You can make the decision?" The Lord of the Dead Sea didn't dare to believe Jiangning's words. In her opinion, other than his face, this man didn't look like someone who could be in charge of the family. Thus her gaze was still on Lung Ruoxua. "Swear, tell her." When Jiangning heard these words that seemed to hurt his self-esteem, He immediately turned around and looked at Lung Ruoxue with hidden bitterness. Well, do as he says. Lung Ruoxue nodded. Actually, she didn't expect the master of the Dead Sea to bring out anything else. However, when she heard the other party say that he wanted to use a hostage to negotiate with her, she felt uncomfortable. She also wanted to let the other party know that a hostage in their hands wouldn't be a threat to them. When the master of the Dead Sea heard Lung Ruoxue's words, the huge stone in her heart finally fell to the ground. Then she started to act cheeky again and laughed. Beauty, I'll order people to prepare more water grass and stones for you. Can you put down the fire first? No, unless you give me a hostage in exchange. Lung Ruoxue's beautiful eyes turned as she smiled. All right then. The master of the Death Sea replied helplessly. She could tell that the little beauty in front of her wouldn't let go until she saw the rabbit. A beauty wouldn't compromise unless she saw some substantial benefits. What a cunning little thing. It's a pity it's not hers, Wu. The master of the Death Sea was worried again, because she was very clear that once she released the three of them, the beauty Lung Ruoxue would no longer have any fate with her. From then on, she could only fantasize about him whenever she thought of him. She could no longer come into close contact with him. This was truly a heart-wrenching matter. Thanks, but what made her even more heartbroken was yet to come. Just as the master of the Dead Sea was about to return to the bottom of the ocean to release the hostages, he suddenly heard a voice that was gritting its teeth coming from behind him. No need to trouble yourself, we're coming up on our own. Upon hearing this voice, the Death Sea master was shocked. He quickly turned around and pointed at the three people in front of him with his eyes wide open in disbelief. You guys, how did you get out? Do you really think that your devouring net can trap me? The demon laughed coldly. The way he looked at the master of the Death Sea was as if he was looking at a dead man. The Death Sea master's little heart trembled. Then he gathered his courage and laughed proudly. Didn't I trap you? Master was trying to save me, otherwise he wouldn't have fallen into your trap. Mu Li scoffed. No matter what, I've succeeded, haven't I? The master of the Dead Sea didn't care what the reason was. After all, the mistress of the dark world was once her prisoner. This fact was enough to make her proud. You've succeeded. Unfortunately, this is not enough. After the demon finished speaking, he grabbed the Lord of the Dead Sea's shoulder and dragged her to the beach. Then, a storm of fists landed on the Lord of the Dead Sea's body. How pitiful. Jiangning looked at the Dead Sea master, who had been beaten up so badly that he had no temper, and said with a hint of sympathy, You can be the hero and save the beauty. She will be touched and will probably devote her life to you. Lung Ruoxue glanced at Jiangning and suggested sincerely, No, I'm not interested in her. I'll leave her for someone who likes her. After saying that, Jiangning looked at Nether Sword and the others with an evil smile. Nether Sword and the others felt the thought-provoking look in Jiangning's eyes and were so frightened that they shivered. They all looked up at the sky in unison and wailed in their hearts. They were not interested in this transvestite either, okay? After an unknown period of time, the demon was tired from beating him up. He gave Mu Li and Ming Zi a look, and the two of them understood, and went forward to continue beating up the master of the Dead Sea. Even though the master of the Dead Sea was beaten up by the demon to the point where she could not fight back, and was trying her best not to make a sound, she did not have the same tolerance for Mu Li and Ming Zi. Hence, as soon as the two of them got close to her, she started to fight back madly. This is really a huge difference in treatment. Uncle Long couldn't help but say, This should be bullying the weak and fearing the strong. Lung Ruoxue said calmly, Shui. At this moment, the evildoer who had just beaten someone up immediately moved in front of Lung Ruoxue like a wife who had done something wrong. He looked at her with an ingratiating expression, his eyes glimmering with Lung Ruoxue in his eyes. Who knew that Lung Ruoxue would only scoff coldly and ignore him? She even turned around with her back facing him. The demon was anxious when he saw this. Wu Shui was angry. She was ignoring him. What should he do? In a moment of desperation, he went around to Lung Ruoxue and looked at his wife pitifully. Unfortunately, Lung Ruoxue still did not look at him. Shui, I know I was wrong. Don't be angry anymore, okay? The evildoer begged for mercy with a fawning look on his face. only hoping that Shui would give him a look. Seeing their master's reaction, Ming Ji and the others were dumbfounded. Oh my god! Who was that man with the silly smile? Their master? No. This was impossible. They must have seen it wrong. That man was definitely not their wise and mighty lord. His lord would never speak to a woman in such a humble manner. Chapter 2548. Inevitable Existence 3. The Lord has been switched. Minga and the others quickly came to a conclusion. However, to their disappointment, even though they were certain that their lord had been switched, they could not deny the aura on his body. Wu. Oh, the wise and mighty great lord, please come back quickly. Don't be like this. They couldn't accept it. Furthermore, when they saw Lung Ruox's cool expression as she ignored their master, and their master's expression as if he was bent on currying favor with her, they all covered their faces. They really couldn't bear to see their master in such a state. However, the evildoer would not care about what his subordinates thought of him. Coaxing his wife back was the right thing to do. Seeing that even after he had said all the good things, Shui still only showed him her back view, the evil demon was a little anxious. He simply pulled Lung Ruoxia into his arms and thought. After Lung Ruoxia realized his intentions, she did a shoulder throw, causing the tall and burly evildoer to fall to the ground. Nether Sword and the others, who had finally regained their senses, were once again dumbfounded. Shui. The demon looked at Shui with a heartbroken expression. His dark eyes started to become misty. Seeing this, Minga and the others simply didn't know how to evaluate their lord's behavior. Sob. Did it have to be so embarrassing? However, when they saw Uncle Long and the others' nonchalant expressions, they felt even more depressed. It seemed that their lord had done this kind of thing a lot. Otherwise, why did they all look so used to it? My lord, where's your integrity? Where did your noble and cold temperament go? Did he feed it to the master of the Dead Sea? The hearts of Minga and the rest were in turmoil. It was as if thousands of alpacas were howling and galloping wildly. They all wanted to kneel in front of Lung Ruoxia. Sob. Miss Lung, please be magnanimous and forgive his lord. Otherwise, his lord might do something shameful again. Who knew that the moment this thought came to their minds, they saw the demon suddenly hugging Lung Ruoxia's legs tightly, and looking at Lung Ruoxia pitifully. Seeing this, Lung Ruoxia's forehead was filled with black lines. Damn it. The demon had actually learned this move. One had to know that those who dared to do this in the past had all been thrown out of the window by him. However, this was not the end. Ming Ji and the others saw that their master had lost so much face that they couldn't care less. They all knelt in front of Lung Ruoxia, tugged on her clothes and said in unison, Miss Lung, please forgive his lord. In fact, what they wanted to say more was that their lord's appearance was really too shocking. But what could they do? The other party was their boss. When their boss was in trouble, how could they sit by and do nothing? All of you get up. Lung Ruoxia's face darkened. She glanced at the three people who were engaged in a heated battle not far away, then looked at the fellow who was kneeling on the ground in front of her. She thought to herself, why is there such a huge difference between them? Fortunately, there were two more normal ones. Shui, are you still angry with me? I know I was wrong. The demon asked in a mosquito-like voice. Where did you go wrong? Lung Ruoxia's face remained stoic, but she was finally willing to talk to him. The demon was greatly relieved. He then crawled up from the ground and said with an uneasy expression, I shouldn't have kept it from you. You actually dared to meet another woman behind my back. Without waiting for the evildoer to finish his sentence, Lung Ruoxia interrupted him angrily and glared at him with eyes that were spitting fire. The demon was dumbfounded when he heard this. Did he meet another woman behind Shui's back? Which one? How could he not know? Shui, I didn't see any other woman. The demon felt wronged. How could Shui wrong him like this? Wu. He was 100 times more wrong than that. You still dare to be stubborn? Your subordinates have already confessed. Lung Ruoxia said through gritted teeth. Confessed? Who told you to? Hearing this, the demon immediately turned his eyes to Minga and the others. They were so frightened that they shook their heads. They shouldn't be wronged in this kind of matter. They definitely didn't say anything. Seeing his subordinates shaking their heads, the evildoer turned back to look at Lung Ruoxue, feeling wronged. Swear, no one said anything. You can't wrong me. Nether Sword. When Lung Ruoxue heard this, she immediately called out names. I didn't say that. I definitely didn't say that. Nether Sword's heart trembled, and his legs began to go soft under the demon's glare. Ooh. Why did she treat him like this? Even though he had offended Lung Ruoxue in the past, wasn't he trying his best to make up for it? Didn't I ask you before? Did your master go to see another woman? There are other women? Lung Ruoxue started to bring up old scores. Yes, but I didn't say that master has other women. Nether Sword said with an aggrieved expression. Yes, you admitted that the demon went to see another woman, but you refused to tell me no matter how I asked. Lung Ruoxue roared in anger. Thanks, Wu. It's the Lord who forbade me from telling you. Nether Sword really wanted to buy a piece of tofu and kill himself. How could he frame people like this? Beside him, Minga and the others were already looking at him with sympathetic eyes. He was extremely depressed. My lord, you won't allow me to tell Miss Lung your whereabouts? Under the demon's furious glare, Nether Sword mustered up his courage and said, I definitely can't take the blame. The demon understood. He couldn't blame Nether Sword for not explaining things clearly, but he had made a grave mistake by causing Schwer to misunderstand. After thinking for a while, the demon decided on the location of the Nether Sword. Schwer, I'm going to meet the master of the Death Sea. He's not a woman. The demon pleaded. But he's not a man. Lung Ruoxue did not intend to let the evildoer off so easily to prevent him from acting on his own in the future. Hence she said this on purpose. The demon didn't know what to say. Wu. Schwer was doing it on purpose. He could tell. Stealing his heart, the evildoer confessed honestly. Schwer, there's a reason why I didn't dare to let you know about this. Can you listen to my explanation? Go ahead. Lung Ruoxue kindly gave him a chance. The master of the Dead Sea is a transvestite who does not care about men or women. I did not dare to let you know because I was afraid that he would have designs on you when he sees you. Although he's not afraid of me, it's not a happy thing to have a disgusting fly-like guy thinking about his woman. That's why I hid it from you and came to the Dead Sea with Ming Zi. The demon said with a face full of sincerity. He paused for a moment before continuing. At first, I thought that I would be able to resolve the issue here very quickly. I didn't expect that there would be an accident. The accident he was referring to was when he was trapped by the Death Sea Master's devouring net. To him, this was considered a humiliation. But luckily, he managed to break free from the devouring net in the end. Otherwise, it would have been really embarrassing. You know that there's no gender difference between humans and demons, yet you still dare to come here? Lung Ruoxue was enraged after hearing the demon's explanation. He doesn't care about men or women, but he doesn't dare to have any ideas about me. Moreover, our prisoner Patian was saved by her, so of course I have to go and get her back. The demon said matter-of-factly, You want to break the heavens? Then why are you the ones who were caught? Lung Ruoxue was speechless. It was an accident. The demon said gloomily. This time he had failed miserably in a small river. My lord did it to save me. At this moment Mu Li, who was walking towards them, couldn't help but interrupt. In his hands, he was still carrying the unconscious Death Sea Master. It's you, you idiot. Lung Ruoxue's face was filled with disappointment. Wu. I can't beat him. Mu Li's eyes were filled with tears, and he felt wronged. Schwer, I can defeat this transvestite. However, I was accidentally trapped by the devouring net, so... The demon quickly expressed his stance. He did not want to be looked down upon by Schwer. Yeah. If Master was at his peak, the devouring net wouldn't have been able to trap him. Mu Li quickly agreed to please her. If it wasn't for the fact that her master's strength was only at the Divine Emperor level, they wouldn't be so aggrieved. Schwer, I've explained everything clearly. You're not angry anymore, right? The demon saw that Schwer's expression seemed to be much better, and quickly seized the opportunity. However, Lung Ruoxue still rolled her eyes at him and pointed at the Death Sea Master who was covered in injuries. How do you plan to deal with this guy? The Dead Sea City is gone. This guy should be well behaved for a few days. I'll just leave him here. The demon said after thinking for a while. Hearing the demon's words, Lung Ruoxue was a little surprised. She thought that the demon would kill this Rinyao in a fit of anger. He didn't expect that the demon would still want to keep him alive. There was definitely something fishy about this. Seeing through Lung Ruoxue's thoughts, the demon calmly said, "This guy can't be killed. Otherwise, I wouldn't have tolerated him for so long." Why? Lung Ruoxue could not understand. However, killing the Lord of the Dead Sea was not a big deal to her. After all, the Lord of the Dead Sea did not cause her any real harm. On the contrary, the Lord of the Dead Sea had suffered quite a lot of losses. When she thought of this, Lung Ruoxue started to pity him. Back then, when the Master of the Death Sea appeared, his aura was so powerful. It was a pity that before he could display his strength, he was scared away by her flames. After that, she set fire to the ocean. No matter how he thought about it, the Lord of the Dead Sea was more aggrieved. The Master of the Dead Sea was born in the Dead Sea and is the incarnation of the Dead Sea. He represents all the resentment in the Nine Nether prison. Therefore he must exist. If the Dead Sea is destroyed, then the responsible emotions of the Nine Nether prison will have no place to go. In that case, the Nine Nether prison will be in chaos. The demon said honestly, "There's such a place?" Lung Ruoxue was speechless. Then wouldn't this transvestite be equivalent to a rubbish collection station? Oh. Thinking about it this way, she was quite pitiful. The Nine Nether prison is different from the divine world. Other than the natives, there are many evil ghosts. The cause of death of these evil ghosts is unknown, and they will more or less release some aura of resentment. The Death Sea's responsibility is to absorb the aura of resentment that they release to prevent the air in the Nine Nether prison from being polluted. Actually, the Lord of the Dead Sea was very obedient at the start and did his job well. However, he absorbed too much resentment and slowly grew crooked. The demon said slowly, his tone somewhat resentful that iron didn't meet steel. Chapter 2549. Where are my breasts? 1. Lung Ruoxue understood. The Death Sea Lord had absorbed too much resentment, which was why he had become uncontrollable. He even had the intention to dominate the Nine Nether prison. However, with a demon around, the Death Sea Lord would not be able to do much. At the same time, she broke out in a cold sweat for her kindness. Fortunately, she didn't violently roast the Dead Sea dry. Otherwise, wouldn't she have ruined the demon's plan? However, this devilish brat, Master of the Death Sea, still needed to be taught a lesson. At the thought of this, Lung Ruoxue pointed at Master of the Death Sea and asked, "Do you need me to help you purify her?" Purification? Upon hearing these two words, Ming Ji and the others felt particularly uneasy. What did this mean? Why did their hearts tremble when they heard that? It was as if something bad was about to happen. Or were they overthinking things? In reality, everything was normal? However, when the demon heard these two words, he nodded with a smile and said, "All right. I'll have to troubleshoot her, just leave her life." With the demon's words, Lung Ruoxue did not hold back and immediately released a small flame. The little flame was dark purple with a tinge of red. It jumped around the unconscious Master of the Dead Sea excitedly. After a while, the Dead Sea Master's body was covered in flames that were half the height of a man. Ming Ji and the others were so scared that they took a few steps back. Oh my God! What was he doing? Didn't his lord say that the Master of the Death Sea cannot be killed? They were truly frightened by Lung Ruoxue's flames. Furthermore, the temperature of the flames was extremely high, causing them to feel extremely uncomfortable. They could empathize with her and instantly understood the Death Sea Lord who was in the flames. They did not pity the Master of the Death Sea, but they felt that if they could feel the heat from the flames even though they were so far away, wouldn't the Master of the Death Sea, who was in the flames, lose his life? However, seeing their master's relaxed and happy appearance, Ming Ji and the others were smart enough not to make a fuss. Otherwise, they would be despised again. At the same time, the Lord of the Death Sea within the flames woke up quickly under the scorching heat. However, she felt that she could not move her body. The flames seemed to be burning something within her body. making her feel unbearable, yet extremely comfortable. Damn it! Who could tell her what was going on? The Death Sea Master did not know what was going on, and could only passively endure the scorching heat. After an unknown period of time, the flame gradually shrunk to the size of a small flame. Then, it floated away from the body of the Master of the Dead Sea, and returned to Lung Ruox's fingertip as if it was asking for a reward. It then disappeared. At this moment, the Lord of the Dead Sea had fainted again. However, Ming Ji and the others could clearly feel that the aura of the Lord of the Dead Sea was different. It seemed to be quite pure. How could the aura of the Master of the Dead Sea be pure? Could they have made a mistake? The few people who didn't quite believe it quickly moved closer to observe. It was indeed very pure. Ming Ji and the others looked at Lung Ruoxue in shock. This was too unbelievable. What's going on? Minga could not help but ask. I've purified her. Lung Ruoxue said indifferently. So powerful. I thought you wanted to burn her to death. Hearing this, Nether Sword immediately said obsequiously. Burning and purifying are indeed only a matter of a thought. Lung Ruoxue said calmly. Then, she looked at Nether Sword and said in a chatting tone. Do you want to try? It feels pretty good. No. I don't want to try. Nether Sword was so frightened by Lung Ruox's words that his face turned pale. He subconsciously hid behind Nether Song. Lung Ruoxue glanced at his actions and laughed nonchalantly. You two seem to have a good relationship? Thanks, Miss Lung. Please don't misunderstand. Our relationship is quite ordinary. Minga said with a serious face. Our relationship with him is just so. Seeing this, the others said in unison. In an instant, Ming Ji and the others quickly drew a clear line with Nether Sword. They did not want to be implicated by this idiot. You disloyal people. Nether Sword was so angry that he made threatening gestures. However, due to the difference in numbers and strength, he could only curse them in his heart. Sob. You can't bully me like this, okay? Nether Sword was very sorrowful. He felt that he would never love again. At this moment, the evildoer patted his shoulder sympathetically and said, Calm down, you still have a little friend. My lord, you're the best. Nether Sword fawningly said. Oh, in the future, you can accompany the Master of the Death Sea and stay in the Death Sea. The demon patted Nether Sword's head and stated his decision in a calm manner. I don't want to. Before Nether Sword could say anything, someone spoke first. And this person was the Death Sea Master, who had just woken up. The Nether Sword was even more furious when he heard this voice. You bastard! I should be the one saying that. What right do you, a loser, have to say no? The consequences of the Nether Sword's anger were quite serious. Are you the one who defeated me? The Death Sea Master said with a look of disdain. It doesn't matter who it is. You are our prisoner. Nether Sword said with a smile. Suddenly, he couldn't help but widen his eyes and cry out. Where are your breasts? Upon hearing this, Lung Ruoxue and the others broke out in cold sweat. They looked at Nether Sword speechlessly and thought, this is not the main point, okay? Could this guy not be so out of line? However, at this moment, the choppy chest of the Master of the Death Sea had indeed become flat. Not only that, the originally demonic face of the Master of the Death Sea had also become more masculine. His voice was also very masculine, and he did not look as feminine as before. It could also be said that the femininity of the Master of the Dead Sea had completely disappeared after being purified by Lung Ruox's flames. Oh, this should be a good thing for a transvestite who was neither a man nor a woman, right? Who knew that when the Master of the Dead Sea heard Nether Sword's words, not only was he not happy, he started to wail as if his parents had died. Woo! Where's my chest? Why are my breasts gone? Oh, my magnificent and proud chest. How could you abandon me? I'm completely relying on you to hook up with men. What am I going to do without you? These words caused Lung Ruoxue and the rest to break out in cold sweat. This fellow really couldn't be treated with common sense. Furthermore, the words he said were too disgusting. In the next second, no one knew who led the way, but Uncle Long and the others all rushed forward and gave the Death Sea Master, who had just woken up, another round of beating. After a long time, the Lord of the Death Sea, who was unable to fight back and had suffered a huge blow, fainted again. I've lived for so long, but I've never seen such a person, Uncle Long said as he clapped his hands. I've never seen him before. Dongfeng Yu agreed. It's good to ignore it. Shui, or shouldn't we go home? The demon turned to look at Lung Ruoxue. Which home? Lung Ruoxue pretended to be confused and asked. Jiuyou City, of course. The demon smiled ingratiatingly and was extremely obedient. Chapter 2550. Where are my breasts? 2. That's my house. Lung Ruoxue raised her eyebrows. Yes. It had to be. What's mine is yours. The demon said matter-of-factly. Since that's the case, let's go back. Lung Ruoxue laughed in an enigmatic manner. All right. The demon was extremely happy. Seeing that Shui was not angry anymore, he was relieved. Following which, he summoned the Dead Sea Deep Octopus and ordered it to bring the unconscious Death Sea Master down. The Dead Sea Deep Octopus did not dare to disobey the demon's order, and obediently carried the Death Sea Master to the bottom of the sea. However, the fear in its eyes before it dived into the Dead Sea left a deep impression on everyone. After dealing with the Death Sea Master, the demon was prepared to return home. However, before he left, he did not forget to leave the Nether Sword in the Death Sea to monitor the Death Sea Master in case he caused trouble again. In reality, this was just an excuse for the demon to punish Nether Sword. As for the Death Sea Master causing trouble, he believed that the purified Death Sea Master would not have such thoughts. Nether Sword, who had not expected to be left here, was deeply sorrowful. How can you treat your loyal subordinates like this? However, no matter how sad Nether Sword was, it was a fact that he was left here. After leaving the Nether Sword behind, Lung Ruoxue and the rest left in a carefree manner. Along the way, the demon was very worried because Shui was ignoring him again. Wu. He thought that Shui was no longer angry. Who knew that the girl's anger didn't subside at all? Shui, can you talk to me? The demon begged for the umpteenth time. We're almost at Jiuyou City. Lung Ruoxue turned to look at the evildoer and replied as he wished. Yup. We're going home. The demon was very happy that Shui was finally willing to talk to him. You should have a princess living in your house. Lung Ruoxue's words confused the demon. Princess? Since when did Jiuyou City have a princess? How could he not know? He turned around and looked at Muli. Muli's face was full of question marks. However, when the others heard this, they all broke out in cold sweat. It was a princess. He should be talking about floating jade, right? At this thought, they all turned to look at Ming Ji, but he was very calm. The expression on his face clearly said, "It has nothing to do with me." Muli, you have an illegitimate daughter? The demon, who didn't understand the situation, asked directly. My lord is wronged. I don't even know where my illegitimate daughter's mother is. Where can we find an illegitimate daughter? Muli felt that he had suffered an undeserved disaster. He had left Jiuyou City earlier than his lord, so how could he have known about the princess? Then where did the princess come from in Jiuyou City? The demon asked angrily. From Shui's tone, she was clearly unhappy. If he didn't draw a clear line between himself and this matter, he would be the one in trouble. Therefore, the evildoer had already made up his mind that he would push everything that had nothing to do with him onto someone else. I'm not sure. After Muli finished speaking, he looked at Ming Zi. Ming Zi saw that the Muley City Master was in danger of spreading the flames of war to him. So he quickly said, My lord, I left Jiuyou City with you. When we left, there was no princess in Jiuyou City, I promise. Thanks, Shui. Did you hear that? There's no princess. The demon nodded in satisfaction. Fortunately, he had a witness. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to wash himself clean even if he jumped into the Dead Sea. Is that so? Lung Ruoxue glanced at the people present with a half-smile, and continued to uphold the principle of silence as gold. Seeing this, the demon's heart began to feel uneasy. After entering Jiuyou City, everyone teleported back to the city lord's mansion. As soon as they entered the mansion, the head guard and head butler of Jiuyou City immediately noticed the demon and the others. He quickly came out to welcome them. Upon hearing the news, Piao Yao also rushed over. When Piao Yao arrived at the entrance, her beautiful eyes were the first to search among the evildoer and the rest. However, she did not see the person she wanted to see the most. Instead, she saw the rather conspicuous Lung Ruoxue standing among the crowd, surrounded by them like a myriad of stars surrounding the moon. In an instant, her jealousy burned and she flew into a rage. "Bitch! You're so bold to not kneel when you see this princess." The floating jade fire roared. Her sharp voice was like a sudden clap of thunder, exploding in front of everyone. In an instant, everyone's eyes turned to her. Having attracted the attention of the crowd, Piao Yao was feeling pleased with herself, and did not notice that many people were looking at her with sympathy. At this moment, she noticed that Lung Ruoxue did not seem to be frightened by her, so she pointed at Lung Ruoxue and shouted unhappily, "Bitch, didn't you hear what I said? Quickly kneel down in front of this princess. You're talking to me." Lung Ruoxue smiled faintly. "Could there be anyone else besides you?" Piao Yao shouted. "I don't think so." Lung Ruoxue's beautiful eyes swept across evildoers and the rest's faces. She then parted the crowd and stood in front of Piao Yao. "Slut, what are you still standing there for? Why aren't you kneeling?" Seeing that Lung Ruoxue was only looking at her, Piao Yao felt a little uneasy. However, she still held her head high and puffed out her chest, ordering Lung Ruoxue with an arrogant look. "Kneel down." Lung Ruoxue smiled calmly. Then she stretched out her snow-white hand and slapped Piao Yao's face. Half of Piao Yao's face immediately swelled up, and she was also directly beaten silly. At this moment, the evildoer came to Lung Ruoxue's side with a face full of heartache. He held her hand and said gently, "Did it hurt? In the future, you don't need to do this kind of thing yourself. Just find someone to do it for you. Otherwise, if I hurt your hand, my heart will ache to death. Miss Lung, in the future, leave this kind of matter to me." Roji also expressed her opinion. "All right, I'll leave her to you. You can continue." Lung Ruoxue said nonchalantly. Yes. Roji was very happy. She could take her revenge at the same time. One should know that she had wanted to beat this woman for a long time. If it wasn't for her strong background, she wouldn't have to swallow her anger until now. Now that she had such a good opportunity to beat this woman, she naturally wouldn't let it go. After that, everyone heard the sound of slapping. After Riji slapped her a few times, Piao Yao finally reacted. She glared at Riji, who slapped her, and shouted fiercely, "Riji, you bitch, you dare to hit me? You're the one I'm hitting." Roji's smile was very gentle, but her hand movements weren't gentle at all. When Piao Yao came back to her senses, her slaps became even more vicious. The pitiful eldest Miss Piao Yao, the #1 beauty of the 9 Nether prison, had her beautiful face beaten into a pig's head. The maidservants behind her were all scared stiff when they saw the fiendish Riji. They didn't dare to help their young miss. "Stop!" At this moment, a furious roar sounded. Then the furious Mingxing grabbed Roji's wrist and stopped her from continuing her violent actions. Chapter 2551. Where are my breasts? 3. Mingxing City Lord, you're hurting me. Roji smiled. Riji, you dare to hit Piao Yao? Who gave you the guts? Mingxing's face turned red with anger as he roared. I asked her to do it. Why? Do you have an opinion? Lung Ruoxue said with a smile. At the same time, she released a flame that burned Mingxing's hand. Mingxing felt the pain and subconsciously let go of Ruji's hand. It's you? I didn't expect you to come back alive. When Mingxing saw Lung Ruoxue, he was slightly shocked. He had even accidentally blurted out the words in his heart. It seems that the Lord of the Dark Travel City doesn't want me to come back alive. I'm sorry to disappoint you. Lung Ruoxue's smile was extremely beautiful, but it did not reach her eyes. When Mingxing saw this, he felt extremely uneasy. In reality, he really did not expect Lung Ruoxue to return unscathed. He was very clear about how dangerous the Death Sea was. He originally thought that this woman would become the forbidden pet of the Lord of the Death Sea. Who knew that she would return so quickly? How could he not be surprised? One had to know that he could not even guarantee that he would be able to leave the Death Sea unscathed. let alone the fact that the other party was only a divine emperor. Although he had thought of this, Mingxing didn't dare to admit it. He only smiled and said, "Miss Lung, you've misunderstood me. How could I not hope for you to come back? It doesn't matter to me what you think. Someone will deal with you." Lung Ruoxue smiled and turned to Ruji. "Ruji, bring Princess Piaoyao and let's go back to our room." "Yes." Ruji nodded delightedly. She threw a provocative look at Mingxing, then grabbed the dazed Piaoyao and prepared to leave. "Wait, you can't take Piaoyao away." Mingxing quickly stopped them. "City Master Mingsong, we can't take her away?" Lung Ruoxue didn't even look at Mingxing, directly asking for Ming Ji's opinion. "Piaoyao requests Miss Lung to deal with her as she wishes," Minga said with a nonchalant expression. "Then I won't be polite." After Lung Ruoxue finished speaking, she turned around and left with Uncle Long and the others. Mingxing became even more anxious. He wanted to stop Ming Ji again, but Ming Ji blocked him firmly. This made him a little angry. "Minga, that's your sister. It's just a father. I have many younger sisters like him in my family. If you like, I'll give you 2 more. Minga said disapprovingly. However, he was afraid that Mingxing would not have his life to enjoy. Sure enough, as soon as he thought of this, he heard his lord, who had been pretending to be invisible, order, "Arrest Mingxing, who has offended his superior, and await his punishment." Hearing this, Mingxing was dumbfounded. Only then did he notice the silent master not far away. His face turned pale with fright and he shivered. My lord, greetings to my lord." Mingxing wanted to kneel down, but the demon turned around and left. Ming Ziyi and the others who passed by Mingxing all looked at him with sympathy, then sighed and left. In the end, it was the kind guard leader who directly captured the somewhat dazed Mingxing and locked him in the imperial prison. On the other side, the evildoer was chasing after Lung Ruoxue, trying to follow her back to her room, but the door was shut in his face. Ruji passed on Lung Ruoxue's words with an apologetic expression. "Master, Miss Lung asked you to find a place to rest on your own. She doesn't welcome you here." Shuer, the demon was heartbroken. How could Shuer treat him like this? However, he knew Shuer's temper very well. Seeing that she was angry, he could only reluctantly turn around and leave like a little wife. Not long after, the guards of the city lord's mansion gathered outside the monster palace's courtyard. They took out wood and other materials from their storage rings and began to build the house. The guards moved nimbly, and a simple house was quickly built. The demon then moved in openly. The window of the house was facing the courtyard where Lung Ruoxue and the others were staying. Hence, he could often see Shuer sitting in the courtyard. The only flaw was that there would always be a woman's painful wail coming from Shuer's courtyard, which was a little noisy. However, he endured it. At this moment, the evildoer only wanted to show how pitiful he was. Every day, he carried an oppressive pressure on his body. The temperature in the city lord's mansion dropped rapidly. Everyone was very careful, afraid that they would offend the master and become cannon fodder. Thanks, however, others could hide far away from his lord, but Mu Li and the others couldn't. Not only that, but they also had to appear at his lord's side often to report to him about the situation in Nine Nether prison, especially to ask him how to deal with Mingxing. However, every time they did this, the evildoer would show extreme impatience and shout at them angrily, "You're asking me about such a small matter. Why do you care what we eat?" Every time he heard his lord say this, Mu Li couldn't help but want to kneel down. Oh, his lord. Mingxing is one of the 10 great main city lords. If you really want to deal with him, you must first agree. They didn't dare to act on their own. In the end, the demon was annoyed by them and could only order them to send Mingxing to the mine. However, he did not say whether he wanted Mingxing to manage the mine or to mine. What Mu Li and the others understood on their own was that their lord wanted Mingxing to manage the mine. Therefore, they very consciously arranged for Mingxing to be in charge of only 10 people. To the former city lords of the 10 major cities, such a punishment was no different from the end of the world. After Mingxing's matter was over, Mu Li and the rest did not dare to casually hang around in front of their master anymore. The demon could finally have some peace and quiet. Every day, He would guard the window and peek at Lung Ruoxue like a wife-gazing stone. Lung Ruoxue had a full view of the evildoer's every move. Every day, she would see him acting like a pitiful little pet, staring at her with his eyes wide open. Her heart almost softened. However, when she thought of the evildoer's crimes, she hardened her heart and ignored him. Otherwise, he would never remember this. Lung Ruoxue had hardened her heart, but Uncle Long and the rest felt especially uneasy. After some thought, they decided to plead for mercy on behalf of the demon. Shui, your demon knows his mistake. Don't be angry with him anymore. Uncle Long advised. Yup. Look at how well-behaved he has been these few days. Just forgive him. Dongfang Yu also said. If he didn't plead on behalf of the demon, he was afraid that the demon would come after him. Sob. It wasn't easy for them. It clearly had nothing to do with them, but a certain someone held a grudge. As she listened to the crowd saying the same or similar words, Lung Ruoxue's face turned darker and darker. When did the evildoer bribe Uncle Long and the others? It was really too detestable. Looking at Uncle Long and the others' behavior, Lung Ruoxue truly felt that she could not forgive this evildoer so easily. She did not want that fellow to admit his mistakes and not change. If someone were to speak up for him whenever he made a mistake, she would be in a passive position. Uncle Long and the others would never have thought that their persuasion would backfire. Otherwise, they would never have said so much. In reality, if they had not acted on a whim, they would have run over to help put in a good word for the evildoer. Perhaps Lung Ruoxue would have already forgiven the evildoer, but now, it was far away again. Those who didn't know were hoping. He didn't know how much time had passed, but he felt like the flowers were about to wither. However, there was still no movement from Shui. Gradually, more and more cold air was released from his body. In the end, Mu Li and the others were the unlucky ones. The demon used special training as an excuse to train Mu Li and the rest, causing them to sigh every day. They couldn't wait for Lung Ruoxue to take their master away. Otherwise, they would be trained to death by their master sooner or later. Sob. Why did their lives have to be so bitter? Mu Li and the rest were extremely worried. After being trained for a few days, they discussed in secret and sent one person to beg Lung Ruoxue every day. In the beginning, Lung Ruoxue ignored them. But as time passed, she was annoyed by them and could not take it anymore. Lung Ruoxue could only surrender and let them find a demon. When the demon heard that Shui wanted to see him, he was so happy that his tail was about to rise to the sky. He was even more proud in his heart. His idea was indeed good. Let's see if Shui can't stand it anymore. He eagerly went to see Lung Ruoxue, but who knew that she would drag him into the room without a second word, leaving Uncle Long, Mu Li, and the rest outside, who were looking at the door with ambiguous expressions. Uncle Long, Mu Li, and the others looked at each other and smiled knowingly. Especially when they heard the banging sounds coming from the room. They were even more certain that this was definitely a good rhythm. It was the so-called husband and wife fight at the head of the bed, and make up at the end of the bed. It's no big deal for a couple to have a little conflict. The most important thing was that the two of them could reconcile. Otherwise, it would definitely not be a good feeling for these cannon fodders to follow them all day long and be on edge. The next day, the demon and Lung Ruoxue left the room. However, the evildoer had been shyly hiding behind Lung Ruoxue. When Uncle Long and the others saw this, they knew that this fellow was embarrassed. Uncle Long will be returning to the divine realm today. Lung Ruoxue ignored the gazes of Uncle Long and the others. Miss Lung, what should I do? Roji asked immediately. Of course you'll stay here. Lung Ruoxue said matter-of-factly. Ruji had a husband here, so she couldn't possibly go to the divinity with her. Then what about Piao Yao? Roji asked again. That woman hadn't been toyed to death by her, but she was on her last breath. Now, she had finally gotten her revenge, which made her feel quite happy. I'll leave it to you to deal with. Lung Ruoxue said after some thought. Although that woman was very rude to her, she was definitely not the unlucky one, so she didn't want to kill Piao Yao. One should know that it was easy to make a person die, but it was very difficult to make a person suffer a fate worse than death. Now that Piao Yao had Ruji, she would definitely suffer a fate worse than death. Roji nodded. Then tears gushed out of her eyes and she said pitifully, "Miss Lung, I will miss you. There's still a long way to go, we'll meet again." Lung Ruoxua said helplessly. Roji nodded again while sobbing. If she didn't have something to worry about, she really wanted to go to the divinity with Lung Ruoxua and the others. She knew that she wouldn't be lonely with these people. Chapter 2552, A Shocking Conspiracy 1. There were many people who had the same idea as Ruji. When Minga and the others heard that their master was going back to the divinity, they tactfully expressed their desire to go with her. Lung Ruoxua did not dare to make the decision for them, so she turned around and pulled the demon out from behind her. "What's your opinion? We can't all go," the demon said viciously. After he finished speaking, he suddenly realized that everyone was staring at him with a dumbfounded look. Instantly, he became angry and roared, "What are you looking at? Have you never seen me before?" Everyone was speechless, not knowing what to say. It wasn't that she had never seen him before, but she had rarely seen such a monster. At this moment, the evildoer's face was covered in bruises and dark circles under his eyes. It was hard not to guess what kind of treatment he had received. This was the rhythm of getting beaten up. Everyone was amazed. However, because the protagonist's eyes were too fierce, they didn't dare to show too much surprise, or this guy would definitely take his anger out on them. Sure enough, as soon as they thought of this, the demon grabbed Feng Chuan, who was the closest to him and was obviously laughing secretly, and punched him. Feng Chuan kept crying out in pain, but those disloyal guys didn't even want to reach out to him. Feng Chuan was so sad. Why was he always the one getting hurt? Sob. This is not fair. It was absolutely unfair. This was bullying Beastie, an act of disregarding Beastie's rights. He wanted to sue the other party for violence, but who could he sue? Sob. Feng Chuan, who had no way to complain, cried out in despair. His voice was so sorrowful that people couldn't help but feel sympathetic. However, although they were sympathetic, it would be wrong for them to offend the demon for Feng Chuan. Just like this, everyone watched Feng Chuan quickly become like the demon with panda eyes. After beating Feng Chuan up, the demon's eyes swept over Uncle Long and the others. Uncle Long and the others were so scared that they quickly took a big step back, wishing they could find a hole to hide in. Sob. They didn't want to be targeted by the demon. That would definitely be a tragic thing. Unfortunately, their wish was beautiful, but reality was cruel. After the demon beat Feng Chuan up like him, he deeply felt that it was best for everyone to share their blessings and difficulties. Naturally, he set his target on someone else, and his next candidate was Uncle Long. As the saying goes, to capture the bandits, first capture the king. Uncle Long had a high reputation among the people. If they were to use Uncle Long as a weapon, no one would dare to complain. However, Uncle Long felt a little uneasy when he saw the demon's gaze. What was this guy trying to do? Uncle Long didn't dare to let his thoughts run wild. He soon found out the demon's goal. "Uncle Long, please cooperate," the demon said with a smile. "Can I refuse?" Uncle Long asked, not giving up. "Of course not. As the saying goes, we should share good fortune and difficulties together." The evildoer said it as a matter of course, and these words made everyone despise him in their hearts. He was clearly the one who angered Shui and was taught a lesson, so why did he have to share the blame with them? However, even if everyone had different opinions, they didn't dare to voice them out in the face of an unreasonable demon. After all, this was his territory. Very quickly, Uncle Long had also been beaten up and had panda eyes like the demon. When the demon saw this, he revealed a smile that could topple cities. Hee hee. Let's see who still dares to laugh at him now. His heart was at ease. Uncle Long and Feng Chuan were depressed. The others were also on tenterhooks, not knowing who would be the next unlucky one. However, they soon found out. After creating two brothers in trouble, the demon set his sights on other people. Uncle Long and Feng Chuan didn't stay idle either. They acted as accomplices. In this way, everyone was in trouble. And the first to suffer, not only did they not have any brotherhood, but they also began to help the evildoers. After a long time, everyone on the scene had a swollen face and two panda eyes. They even attacked a beautiful woman like Ruji. Ruji was so angry that she glared at the murderer. However, when she saw that everyone was in the same state, she couldn't help but laugh. Thanks, haha. Other than Miss Lung, none of us are left out, Ruji said, gloating over Lung Ruoxia's misfortune. It was a pity that no one dared to beat Lung Ruoxia up. Otherwise, everyone would be in the same situation. However, their chaotic battle earlier had somewhat offset the sad atmosphere of their parting. Now, even if Ruji wanted to be sad, she couldn't pretend. We can't beat her, Dongfeng Lin said gloomily. How about I give you 3 moves? Lung Ruoxia blinked her eyes innocently and asked. I won't fight you even if you give me 30 moves. Dongfeng Lin said, knowing his own limitations. If he were to really fight this girl, wouldn't he be the one to suffer? With that extremely protective demon, he was dead for sure. As smart as he was, how could he do such a losing business? That's such a pity. Lung Ruoxia continued to act innocent. The crowd sneered at her expression. Lung Ruoxia's mood was lifted when she saw it. Feeling Shui-er's excitement, the demon came forward and tried to please her. Shui-er, you've finally vented your anger, haven't you? Everyone was speechless. So they were beaten up just to let Shui-er vent her anger? They were clearly not the ones who had provoked Shui-er. How could they be blamed for this? They felt extremely unbalanced. However, in the face of such a domineering evildoer, they really didn't dare to make a sound. Otherwise, in a fit of anger, that guy might cut them into 8 pieces or make them stay here forever. No matter which one it was, they didn't like it. At the thought of this, Uncle Long and the others walked over to Lung Ruoxia with bitter faces to make their presence known. The red expressions on their faces clearly said, Do you feel guilty? Do you feel guilty? Lung Ruoxia returned them a wide smile, showing that she didn't feel guilty. Uncle Long and the others were completely dumbfounded. Sob. They knew that Shui-er would forget her friends when she saw a man. Following that, they heard Lung Ruoxia chuckling. Let's go. Let's go. Everyone nodded. Wait, what should we do? At this time, Minga and the others asked anxiously. Lung Ruoxia blinked her beautiful eyes and looked at Ming Ji and the others. Seeing that Lung Ruoxia was feigning ignorance, Ming Ji could only continue. We also want to go to the Divine Realm. Oh, then which one of you will go? Your lord said that you can't all go. Lung Ruoxia reminded. Minga and the others looked at each other. They all wanted to go. Why don't you use your strength to speak? Lung Ruoxia suggested when she saw that they seemed to be in a dilemma. It's not fair to use strength. Someone immediately objected. How is it unfair? Don't we respect the strong in the 9 Nether prison? I agree to use strength to determine the quota to go to the Divine Realm. Minga agreed. Of course you agreed. With your strength, you will definitely be able to go to the divinity. One of the city lords of the 10 major cities, who was ranked lower in strength, said angrily. Chapter 2553. A shocking conspiracy too. Who can you blame for your inferior skills? Minga said lightly. It was obvious that he wanted to use his strength to suppress them. You, Ming Ji's words almost angered the crowd, but there were still some rational people who came forward to smooth things over. Ming Zi, who was as cunning as a fox, said with a smile. Calm down, everyone. We're all brothers. There's no need to shed all pretenses of cordiality over such a small matter. However, in order to give everyone a chance to go to the Divine Realm, I think we should draw lots to decide. Whoever gets it will go, and those who can't will stay and look after the house. How about it? After hearing Ming Zi's suggestion, the other 7 city lords present all nodded in agreement. However, how many of them were going? His lord had said that they could not all go, and they did not dare to disobey his orders. When someone asked this question, the evildoer didn't say anything. Instead, he looked at Lung Ruoxia. His meaning was clear. Shui-er should be the one to make the decision. There are only 8 city lords from the top 10 major cities here. Just 4 of you will go, Lung Ruoxia said with a smile. Minga and the others were very satisfied that half of them could go, which meant that they had a 1/2 chance of following their lord. Thinking of the upcoming drawing of lots, The 8 of them rubbed their fists and wiped their palms, ready to fight. Wait, what about me? Suddenly, a discordant voice broke the 8 people's excitement. They looked over and saw that it was the city lord of Muley City who had spoken. They immediately felt uneasy. The city lord of Muley City was the closest person to their master. If the city lord had insisted on going, they would not have dared to stop him. However, they were not willing to let the city lord take one of the 4 spots. However, they were smart enough not to say anything. They only stared at Lung Ruoxue. You can stay in the 9 Nether prison. This place can't do without you. Lung Ruoxue glanced at the demon and laughed. You're bullying me. I've been here for a long time. Mu Li said with an aggrieved expression. Oh really? Then you'll have to stay. Lung Ruoxue said with a smile. When Mu Li heard this, he was immediately speechless. After taking a few deep breaths, he turned his attention back to the demon and said pitifully, Lord, let me follow you. I'm much more useful than these guys. His words had offended all 8 of them, and the way they looked at him had become unfriendly. However, he didn't care at all, as the biggest boss was his lord. Who cared what those small fish and shrimp thought? However, the demon didn't like him either. After glancing at Mu Li, he smiled and said, It's not impossible for you to follow me, but you just have to defeat me. Upon hearing this, Mu Li was completely listless. His lord didn't love him anymore. His lord had a change of heart. Mu Li's sorrow made Ming Ji and the others ecstatic. They felt that their lord was awesome. One sentence was enough to make Mu Li never love again. Ha ha ha. In this way, they also had one less competitor. How could they not be excited? Thanks. When the drawing of lots began, the 8 of them were rather nervous. They kept hesitating about which lot to draw, so they did not make any movements even after a long time. Lung Ruoxue was almost driven mad by their insistencies. In the end, it was only after she placed the last announcement that the 8 of them quickly decided on the lot they would draw. The drawing of lots finally ended. Ming Zi, and the 2 weaker city lords among the 8 were all on the list. Those who got a good lot were naturally overjoyed, while those who didn't get to go cried out without caring about their image. When Lung Ruoxue saw the 5 grown men crying like babies with snot and tears streaming down their faces, she was speechless and didn't know what to say. Did it have to be so exaggerated? Lung Ruoxue sighed. It wasn't like they couldn't see each other anymore, but Mu Li had actually joined in the fun. This time, the 4 people who couldn't go became even more fearless. For a moment, Minga and the others who could go became the public enemy of the 5 people. They were constantly being stared at with tears in their eyes, but they were quite calm. Stop crying. We're leaving. Lung Ruoxue, who could not take it anymore, roared. Her shout was really effective. Mu Li and the others immediately acted like a little wife who had been wronged and didn't dare to cry out loud. However, their occasional sobbing also made Lung Ruoxue feel helpless. In the end, Lung Ruoxue had no choice but to use her trump card, which was to tempt him with pills. Those who couldn't go to the divine realm with them were each given a few bottles of pills, including healing pills, netherworld power recovery pills, and even all kinds of poisons. The cannonball had indeed healed Mu Li's group of 5's fragile glass hearts. However, Lung Ruoxue had clearly underestimated their determination to go to the divinity. The 5 of them had tempted Ming Ji's group of 4 with the pills in their hands, and wanted to exchange for a place to go to the divinity with them in front of her without any scruples. Fortunately, Minga and the others had resisted the temptation of the cannonball, and did not fall into the other party's trap. Lung Ruoxue was also afraid that a long night would bring more trouble, so she quickly pulled the evildoer and left Joyo City with the rest. Even after they had left Joyo City, everyone could still feel the burning gazes of Mu Li and the others, which made them speed up their pace. After leaving Joyo City, they were led by the evildoer and teleported to the place where they had first arrived. There were few people there, so returning to the divine world from there would not cause panic in the 9 Nether prison. Are you all ready? Before breaking through the void, the demon routinely asked. Everyone nodded, while Minga and the others looked excited. He was finally going to the divine realm. Such an opportunity was truly too rare. The demon received everyone's response and raised his hand slightly. A black light was released from his fingertips in an instant. A black hole the size of a human eye appeared in the gray space. As the black hole gradually grew to the size of a human, the demon pulled Lung Ruoxue along and walked in first. Uncle Long and the others quickly followed. After entering the black hole, everyone felt the cold again. After the demon gave them a layer of protection, they obviously felt more comfortable. The black hole was still so dark that they couldn't even see their fingers in front of them. However, the people who had experienced this time weren't as flustered as they were last time. They were much calmer. Minga and the others were extremely excited about this kind of spatial journey. Although the four of them were all Reverend God level, they did not have the courage to break through the void. Now that they could have such an experience, they could not ask for more. He didn't care if the dark space tunnel was suitable for a party, but he could hear the four of them chit-chatting and expressing their excitement. In the end, it was the evildoer who couldn't bear it anymore and ordered them to shut up. Only then did the four of them shut their mouths aggrieved. However, the bright and resentful eyes in the darkness revealed their thoughts. When Lung Ruoxue saw this, she laughed to herself. As the spatial passageway distorted, everyone's bodies began to tremble involuntarily. Minga and the other three were a little flustered, but they quickly calmed down. When the spatial passageway finally stabilized, they knew that they had arrived at their destination. Chapter 2554. A Shocking Conspiracy 3. After exiting the spatial passageway, before the group had time to get excited, they suddenly discovered that the place they were in was a barren land, and there were burn marks everywhere in front of them. The flowers, plants, and trees had all been destroyed, and the house they lived in was also in ruins. Lung Ruoxue's pupils, which were emitting a cold aura, suddenly contracted. This was indeed their territory in the land of demons. However, the place in front of them was clearly in a state of violent destruction. Damn it! Who did this? The Dragon Clan? The Phoenix Clan? The White Tiger Race or the Rime Ice? The enemies she had provoked were just these few. At the thought of this, Lung Ruoxue's anger rose from the bottom of her heart to the top of her head. Her family had been destroyed, but she could not determine who the murderer was. It was not a good feeling, and the situation in front of her made her rage burn to the peak. Where were the beastmen? She thought of the beastie who had stayed behind to guard the land of demons. Those cute beastie, could they have also been killed by the enemy? Lung Ruoxue suddenly felt regret. If it wasn't for her confidence in the defenses of the land of demons, she wouldn't have left these beasts to guard the house. Now, thinking about how she might have caused the deaths of those adorable beastie, Lung Ruoxue's heart was filled with endless regret. Shui-er, the evildoer, could sense Lung Ruoxue's emotions. He gently pulled her into his embrace and consoled her silently. He did not know what else to say. He did not expect that the land of demons would be ambushed on his trip to the Nine Nether prison. Uncle Long and the others also felt extremely heavy-hearted. The leopard tribe where the old leopard was from was one of the beast tribes that stayed behind. They were familiar with the old leopard, so they did not dare to think whether the old leopard and the other beasts were still alive or hiding. They had hoped that the old leopard and the other beasts had all hidden. But this obviously self-deceiving idea made them feel extremely uneasy. Seeing their homes destroyed to this extent, they knew that the enemy was very powerful. Haha, you're finally back. We didn't wait for you in vain. Just as Lung Ruoxue and the rest were fuming with rage at the scene before them, a woman's smug voice was suddenly heard. A few figures appeared in front of Lung Ruoxue and the others. When Lung Ruoxue saw these people, her beautiful eyes squinted as she coldly said, "So it's you guys." The Dragon Emperor and the Phoenix King were the leaders of the group. The rest of the people were the elders of the Dragon, Phoenix, and White Tiger race. All of them had the strength of Reverend God level. The moment Lung Ruoxue and the rest saw them, the truth was clear. "It's us," the Phoenix King said proudly. "Lung Ruoxue, you're dead this time." The Dragon Emperor roared with a face full of fury. When the Dragon Emperor and Phoenix King saw Lung Ruoxue, the hatred in their hearts was triggered. When they thought of the things Lung Ruoxue had done to their two clans, the two of them wished they could skin her alive and eat her up. This was especially so for the Phoenix King. Even though she could not confirm if Lung Ruoxue was the one behind the incident in her clan, she could not help but link it to Lung Ruoxue when she thought about the loss of the Phoenix clan and her loss of control over the clan. Especially after hearing the Dragon Emperor and the White Tiger King confirm that Lung Ruoxue had visited their clans, she was even more certain that Lung Ruoxue was the one behind the incident in her clan. Not only that, but she had also confirmed from Wu Cheng that there was no advisor by the name of Lian Wu. This further confirmed Lung Ruoxue's crime. The detestable Lung Ruoxue had caused many of the elders of the Phoenix clan to run away from home and go into closed-door cultivation. Not only did she have no one to use, but she had also destroyed her many years of management in the Phoenix clan. With such a deep hatred, wouldn't she be unworthy of being a noble phoenix if she didn't take revenge? Originally, they had colluded with Wu Cheng with the intention of capturing Lung Ruoxue and the others in one fell swoop. Who knew that when they arrived at the land of demons, they could not find any traces of Lung Ruoxue and the others. This fact made them extremely angry. Fortunately, Wu Cheng was proficient in array formations. After destroying the defenses of the land of demons, they wantonly destroyed the place and finally vented some of their anger. However, the fact that they were unable to capture Lung Ruoxue and the rest's resentment made them stay behind to wait for their prey. It was also thanks to the divine weapon given to them by Wu Xian that their aura was concealed. That was why Lung Ruoxue and the rest were unable to discover them at the first moment. Now they had taken the initiative to show themselves. It was also time to settle the score with Lung Ruoxue. Thanks. When the Phoenix King thought of this, he became even more proud and said, "Lung Ruoxue, no one can save you this time, haha. You can just wait for your death." After saying that, the Phoenix King laughed wildly. Lung Ruoxue frowned and replied calmly, "Are you sure?" "Haha. Of course we're sure. Lung Ruoxue, we've already set up an inescapable net, and we're just waiting for you to fall into it." The Dragon Emperor also laughed wildly. With the two of them taking the lead, the elders present also laughed. "Are you guys daydreaming?" Uncle Long couldn't help but pour cold water on them when he saw them laughing so smugly. "Old whale, you're mistaken. We're not daydreaming, you're the one who's struggling. However, as a kind person, I'm willing to give you a way out. As long as you surrender and hand over Lung Ruoxue, we won't kill you. How about it?" The Phoenix King said in an alluring voice. The expression on her face was as proud as she could be. Lung Ruoxue had caused her to be abandoned by her family and friends. She would not let Lung Ruoxue have an easy time either. However, she had clearly underestimated the courage of Uncle Long and the others, because as soon as she finished speaking, Dongfeng Lin laughed and said, "Trying to drive a wedge between us? Don't you think too highly of yourself?" "That's right. Who do you think you are?" Uncle Long and the others immediately agreed. "Don't be so shameless. If you don't do as I say today, you'll be dead," the Phoenix King threatened. Her beautiful eyes swept across Uncle Long and the others. Suddenly she saw Feng Chuan, who was hiding in the crowd and looked quite inconspicuous. Her eyes darkened, and then she shouted, "Feng Chuan, why are you here? You're with our enemy, you traitor of the Phoenix kind." When Feng Chuan heard this, he could only roll his eyes helplessly at Feng Wang. He didn't deny the Phoenix King's words. Seeing this, the Phoenix King was even more furious. After seeing Feng Chuan, Lung Ruoxue's crime was confirmed. After some thought, Prince Feng turned to look at Lung Ruoxue and asked fiercely, "Lung Ruoxue, were you the one behind the Phoenix clan's incident? Would you believe me if I said it wasn't he?" Lung Ruoxue replied calmly, "Of course I don't." The Phoenix King said without thinking, "Then why are you still asking me?" Lung Ruoxue was a little speechless. She suspected that the Phoenix King had been angered to the point of losing her mind. Actually, the moment she saw the Phoenix King, she had already guessed that her crime had most likely been exposed. Hence, she naturally did not want to deny anything. However, she did not expect that the Phoenix King would still ask her so innocently if she was the one behind the Phoenix clan's incident. What was the difference? The Phoenix Prince was rendered speechless by Lung Ruoxue's words. She also felt that she had asked a silly question, and Lung Ruoxue had obviously tacitly agreed to it. However, when she saw Lung Ruoxue's calm expression, She felt that it was an eyesore no matter how she looked at it. What an annoying woman. Right now, the level of detest she had for Lung Ruoxua had already surpassed Wu Yan's. Their purpose for coming to the land of demons this time was naturally to capture Lung Ruoxua, and the rest in one fell swoop. They could not allow this woman to continue to run wild in the god world. Otherwise, their three clans would be in trouble sooner or later. Just as the Phoenix King was deciding on Lung Ruoxia's death sentence, Lung Ruoxia's beautiful eyes swept across the Phoenix King and the Dragon Emperor. She then said with a regretful expression, "Why don't I see the white tiger? Aren't you two on the same side?" The few elders of the white tiger race were completely ignored by her. Of course we're on the same side," the Dragon Emperor said angrily. "Oh, I remember now, the White Tiger King once swore not to have any thoughts of harming me. Why, has he been punished by the heavens?" Lung Ruoxua laughed as she teased, but in her heart, she wanted nothing more than to tear the White Tiger King into pieces. Damn it! The White Tiger King must have sold her out. Other than the White Tiger race, she had always thought that her movements in the Dragon and Phoenix races were extremely secretive, and she would never give herself away. However, looking at the Dragon Emperor's eyes, which were filled with ferocity, as if he had killed his father, what else could she not understand? In reality, Lung Ruoxia's guess was pretty close to the mark. Thinking back to their operation in the White Tiger race, the Dragon Emperor had received news of it and raised his guard. However, he never thought that someone would still succeed. And after the dragon race suffered losses, the first person he thought of was Lung Ruoxua, because other than her, no one else would dare to do such a thing. After that, he specially sent someone to ask the White Tiger King about the details of the incident. When the two sides confronted each other, Lung Ruoxua naturally could not escape the charge. However, neither of the two clans warned the Phoenix clan, so the Phoenix clan naturally suffered. After the incident, the Phoenix King, who had learned of the situation, was rather resentful towards the Dragon Emperor and the White Tiger King for being so immoral. However, the two of them had shamelessly told her that they had never expected Lung Ruoxua to go to the Phoenix clan. The matters in their own clan were already enough to cause them a headache, so how could they have the time to care about others? More importantly, the relationship between the three clans was no longer as harmonious as before. When one family was in trouble, they naturally didn't want the other families to stand on the side and watch the show. If they were to be in trouble, they would be in trouble together. With this thought in mind, the three clans finally became grasshoppers on the vine. However, the Phoenix clan had suffered more losses than the other two clans, so the Phoenix King had gone to settle the score with the mist ripple on impulse. Chapter 2555. Spatial Imprisonment. 1. It was naturally not easy to find trouble with Rhyme. When she saw the Phoenix King coming to her aggressively like a madman, she only felt baffled at the beginning. Later, after the battle between the two and the Phoenix King was defeated, she asked the angry Phoenix King about what had happened. At that time, she also knew what kind of blow the Phoenix King had suffered. It was one thing for the Phoenix tribe to lose their treasures. As long as they continued to collect them, they would definitely have them. However, what the Phoenix King could not tolerate the most was the fact that the Phoenix tribe's parasol tree forest had disappeared without a trace. The Phoenix King didn't even know how the parasol tree forest disappeared. This fact almost made the Phoenix King go crazy. After learning the truth, Wuxia showed a little sympathy for the Phoenix King, but this was definitely not the reason for the Phoenix King to fight with her. However, Wuxia was a smart woman and knew that she should be magnanimous when it was time to be magnanimous. Therefore, she kindly expressed to the Phoenix King that she would give her an explanation. In reality, after the Phoenix King had told her about the Phoenix clan, the first person that came to Wuxia's mind was Lung Ruoxua. However, even if this wasn't Lung Ruoxia's doing, she still wanted to pin the blame on Lung Ruoxua. Ever since Lung Ruoxia's identity was exposed, the magical beasts had become more and more out of her control. There were many times when the magical beasts, led by the dragon, Phoenix and White Tiger race, did not really listen to her orders. And now, the incident with the Phoenix race had given her this opportunity. So no matter how disrespectful the Phoenix King was to her, she could forgive him. It was precisely because of this that Wu Yan soon colluded with the Phoenix King. The dragon race and the white tiger race were also easily dragged into the water. According to the Dragon Emperor and White Tiger King's thoughts, if God Lord Rime took the lead in finding trouble with Lung Ruoxue, it would be greatly beneficial to them. They could also take revenge at the same time. However, they were still cautious and did not bring out the most powerful lineup of their two races, who asked Lung Ruoxue to have a powerful Totoro by her side. Even God Lord Rime could do nothing about that Totoro. The Fog Ice and the Phoenix King were naturally unaware of their selfish motives. The White Tiger King had even told them directly that he had been tricked by Lung Ruoxue, and had sworn an oath not to harm her. Hence, he could not appear for this operation, but he could provide some elders. It was precisely because of this that the White Tiger King's figure was not discovered in the formation of the kings of the three clans. Ever since the operation had begun, the White Tiger King on Longevity Mountain had been restless like an ant in a hot pot. The White Tiger race's division had also become even more serious because of this matter. Many elders did not agree to attack Lung Ruoxue. They were truly frightened by Lung Ruoxue. However, the White Tiger King had chosen to act willfully for his own selfish motives. Now that Lung Ruoxue didn't see the White Tiger King, she naturally knew why. However, she wouldn't think that this matter had nothing to do with him just because the White Tiger King wasn't around. Since the White Tiger race had sent out an elder with godly venerable rank strength, he definitely wouldn't be able to escape this. White Tiger King, you're dead. Lung Ruoxue's heart was filled with anger as she looked at the few people in front of her. At this moment, the Dragon Clan, Phoenix Clan, and White Tiger Clan had already completely stood against her, and had become Wuxian's lackeys. One must know that according to her original plan, she had wanted to recruit these guys to give some benefits to the former Dragon Emperor and the others who were imprisoned. However, it was obvious that she had been too lenient last time, so it did not have any deterrent effect. Now, these people obviously had something to rely on, so they came to show off in front of her without fear. Oh, she would let these proud beasts know what it meant to be sad after extreme joy. With this thought in mind, Lung Ruoxue's gaze towards them turned increasingly dark. This time, the other party had delivered himself to her door, so why should she be polite? She secretly gave Uncle Long and the others a look. Lung Ruoxue was about to move Tsang and the beasts out of her bangle, when she suddenly felt a great shock. What was going on? Why did she lose contact with the space? Thanks, Qingju. Qingju. She called out to him a few times, but Green Vessel did not reply. Lung Ruoxue could not help but feel anxious. He hurriedly sent a voice transmission to the demon, Uncle Long, and the others. Everyone was shocked when they heard this. Shui, calm down. Without that Totoro, we can still deal with these guys. The demon quickly consoled. I know, Lung Ruoxue replied. She was just a little depressed. If this situation was caused by herself, she would naturally be quite calm. However, this matter had actually happened without any warning. This made her a little helpless and worried about the safety of Qingju and the others. At this moment, Song, who was in the house, and Green Vessel, who was in the bracelet, were also angry that they couldn't leave. Especially Tsang. It was so angry that it wanted to destroy the house. Unfortunately, after a few times of making a scene, the house didn't move. The house was built by the Grand Elder. It was made of the best materials, and Lung Ruoxue had reinforced the defensive array, making it very durable. Moreover, Song did not dare to make too much noise for fear of hurting Shui. After all, Shui had brought this house with her. If the house was destroyed, Shui would inevitably get hurt. As such, Song was naturally restricted. Green Vessel's situation was not any better than Song's. Moreover, his strength was not as good as Song's. After being imprisoned, he would not be able to break the restriction for a while. This made him so anxious that he was spinning around on the spot, causing Baby and the other beasts to see stars in their eyes. Although they really wanted to advise Qingju to calm down, they could not bring themselves to say it. Sop. They were also worried about their master. While Lung Ruoxue, who was outside, knew that something was amiss, She had no idea who was the one behind this. Just as she was thinking this, another burst of smug laughter entered her ears. Aha, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and do it. As soon as she finished speaking, a beautiful woman in red appeared and released her pressure. Her appearance was also so sudden. However, the aura of her appearance was clearly not something that the Dragon Emperor and the others could compare to. The Divine Master hasn't arrived yet. How could we dare to attack? It would be our fault if we ruined your plan. The Phoenix King laughed. The intimacy between the two of them made them seem like sisters who had known each other for many years. Lung Ruoxua felt like puking when she looked at these two extremely hypocritical women. That's true. You can make your move now. Wuxian laughed complacently. In fact, she knew that the Phoenix King was not telling the truth. They did not dare to make a move because they were afraid of Lung Ruoxua and the others, especially Tsang who was beside her. More importantly, Lung Ruoxua had too many tricks up her sleeves that were hard to guard against. This was the reason why they did not dare to act rashly. Upon hearing that they could make a move, the Dragon Emperor and the rest didn't dare to move. Instead, they all stared at Wu Ling. Wu Ling was a little annoyed by their stares and couldn't help but curse in her heart. These useless fellows. She had already asked them to make a move. Yet they were still standing there like fools. Weren't they clearly trying to watch the show for that bitch Lung Ruoxua? River Ripple was somewhat displeased. Looking at their interaction, Lung Ruoxua laughed nonchalantly. God Lord Fog Ripple, it seems your words didn't have much of an effect. None of them actually listened to you. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.